United States. Inside a certain government meeting room, the air was thick with smoke, and a group of people were puffing on cigars, their expressions exceedingly grim. The current head of the Avelson family, Jose Avelson, sat in a chair, his demeanor cold and detached, as he slowly began. Gentlemen, it seems our plan to force the other party into compliance has failed. Facing Jose Avelson, an official from the tax bureau, visibly annoyed with a darkened face, said, Mr. Avelson, we could have been collecting taxes properly, but because of our cooperation with your operation, now there's a huge loss in the national treasury. Your way of doing things has made it difficult for everyone. That's right, my chain of supermarkets has suffered severe losses. We used to earn commissions of over $100 million monthly from Tianyuan hair growth liquid. And now all the money's been made by the black market smugglers instead. Who's going to compensate for our losses? Another chairman of a large supermarket chain was also pounding the table, deeply regretting the failed operation of trying to steal a chicken only to lose the rice used to lure it. If only I hadn't cooperated with Aster Pharmaceutical, losing so much interest for nothing. The meeting room was filled with the privileged elite. A world top 500 and renowned multinational pharmaceutical company like Aster Pharmaceutical always preferred to interact with the influential and powerful. Now, facing the rampant smuggling of Tianyuan hair growth liquid, there was no doubt that their strict blockade policies had failed, which is why they had gathered together to discuss countermeasures. In response to the accusations, Jose Avelson bowed and said, I didn't anticipate this, and it has resulted in losses for all of you. However, we're not without opportunities to recoup. Since smuggling is rampant, then we will crack down on these smugglers. The smuggled Tianyuan hair growth liquid comes from Mexico. First, we'll have Mexico seal off the transportation channels at the border. Furthermore, we'll send special teams to combat criminal gangs involved in smuggling these items. For this, we need the strength of relevant personnel. As long as we subdue the smuggling, Tianyuan Daily will have no choice but to accept our demands. As he spoke, Jose Avelson looked towards a stern-faced, middle-aged man in the room. Your Excellency Judith, Aster Pharmaceutical is willing to donate $50 million in cash to your department as funding for overseas activities. I believe with your methods, taking down those criminal gangs shouldn't be a problem, right? The man named Judith was no other than a high-ranking official from the CIA, especially invited to the scene by Jose Avelson. After the success of the operation, we at the CIA will take 30% of the net revenue from Tianyuan hair growth liquid, Judith said in a calm tone, stating his demand. As these words were spoken, numerous people's eyelids twitched in response, cursing inwardly. Jose Avelson furrowed his brows and thought for a long time. Considering that they needed to rely on the CIA's power, he finally had no choice but to nod. I can agree to that demand. A hint of a smile appeared on Judith's indifferent face. Although the CIA is the United States' most important foreign intelligence agency, responsible for collecting intelligence on foreign governments, companies, terrorist organizations, individuals, political, cultural, and scientific developments, and also boasts formidable operational capabilities, from bribery and assassination to sponsoring anti-government forces in enemy countries and facilitating arms trades and more. It can be said that the CIA has always had multiple roles, but to complete all these tasks, the CIA also needs funding. In order to rake in money, apart from government appropriations, the CIA takes quite an initiative. Not to mention, the shadow of the CIA looms behind many drug lords and organized crime figures. In addition to combating the smuggling in Mexico, we also need the CIA's power to help us deal with JECA Company within Chan country's territory. That's Tianyuan hair growth liquid's stronghold. Only by taking them down can we truly gain the profits from Tianyuan hair growth liquid. Jose Avelson continued to lay out his demands. He was also aware that JECA Company had been aggressively expanding its military capabilities recently, which made him uneasy. If it weren't for the local warlords, whom they supported, not being ready, he would have already given the order to strike. He's just a regional warlord. We can help you with that, Judith replied without hesitation. All they needed to do was to label the other party as a terrorist. How could they not control him? The right to define was in the hands of the CIA after all. In the past, the CIA had done this kind of thing more than once. As long as the funding was in place, they could even overthrow a nation, let alone a minor warlord. With Judith's assurance, Jose Avelson visibly relaxed a great deal. Although promising a substantial part of the profits, gaining the friendship of the CIA was beneficial overall for Aster Pharmaceutical. With the CIA's vast influence overseas, Aster Pharmaceutical could go further and deeper. Ladies and gentlemen, victory is in sight. We will undoubtedly be the final victors over a mere enterprise. Jose Avelson stood up and bowed once again. Everyone exchanged smiles. With the CIA's involvement, they already saw the hope of victory. Soon after the meeting ended, the United States Commerce Office held another press conference. The spokesperson angrily stated in front of the reporters, "Recently, we discovered large-scale smuggling at the U.S.-Mexico border. Criminals have brought Tianyuan hair growth liquid, which our department has explicitly banned from selling, into our territory. Behind this must be the aiding and abetting of Tianyuan Daily, circulating products through illegal channels and supplying criminals, thus endangering the public. We urge Mexico to immediately initiate the corresponding ban to prevent Tianyuan hair growth liquid from passing through customs and becoming a weapon for criminals to earn black gold. Hereby, our Commerce Department officially issues the final ultimatum. Tianyuan Daily has jeopardized the national security of the United States and must immediately stop this smuggling activity and pay a fine of $3.698 billion, or we will initiate comprehensive sanctions." Reporters below, sensing big news, raised their microphones and asked, "Are you saying Tianyuan Daily is involved in smuggling? Do you have evidence?" "Of course there is evidence, but it is not convenient to show it at the moment. Once we catch all the culprits, they will be punished by law." The spokesperson from the Commerce Office insisted, stating they would make Tianyuan Daily pay the price. "I'd like to ask, how exactly has Tianyuan Daily jeopardized our national security? Is there detailed medical validation and data to support the harm to health?" Another reporter stood up, the tone excited. "It involves national security secrets, so it is not convenient for us to answer." Next, the spokesperson's face turned darker, hurriedly looking for a friendly journalist. "With such actions from Tianyuan Daily, should we consider directly freezing their funds?" A CNN reporter immediately made the suggestion to the spokesperson, ignoring the disdainful looks from fellow journalists. "That's something we'll consider." The spokesperson said dryly, had Tianyuan Daily's money been stored overseas, they would have frozen its assets long ago, letting them know what it means to be the world police. Unfortunately, they didn't have the opportunity. Seeing the eager eyes below, the spokesperson felt the press conference was a bit like being under siege and didn't dare to let the questioning continue. They hastily ended the conference and left somewhat awkwardly. The statement from the United States floated across the ocean, and in today's highly developed global information society, it quickly topped the trending searches on Weibo. Facing the accusations and fines from the United States, Tianyuan Daily also released an announcement. "Regarding the smuggling allegations made by the United States, we were completely unaware. Tianyuan hair growth liquid is only sold by our company, and where the buyers transport it to after the sale is entirely their own business. Additionally, we would like to kindly remind you that smuggling is rampant within the United States, and perhaps you should start by looking within to see if there is something wrong on your end. Otherwise, why don't other countries have smuggling issues? As for the fine, we are a Hua country enterprise, and you, the United States, have no jurisdiction over us." This tough announcement caused a sensation in Hua country, and the netizens were overjoyed. "Prince Cookies. Tianyuan Daily is awesome. This is the first time I've seen such a tough Hua enterprise, and just for that, I support them. Humans don't deserve Luo Ji." The logic of the old robbers in the United States, claiming health hazards without a shred of evidence. Mao Lian. Turns out there's the smuggling route. All I can say is Tianyuan Daily did a beautiful job. Drunken. Listening to Rain Tower. The announcement by Tianyuan Daily is so arrogant. It's as if they're saying, "I just love how you hate me but can't do anything about it." Napoleon loves noodles. Even your American public is snapping up Tianyuan hair growth liquid, which proves the product is genuinely good. Why not just open up the market? At least then you could collect some taxes. Smiling Fish NN. To the comment above, do you think we in the United States are shameless? We just blocked and removed the product, and now you want us to lift restrictions under the pretext of smuggling. What will Europe think of us? What will Russia think of us? What will our allies think of us? Qingshan Escapee. I support the United States in strictly punishing Tianyuan daily. Such an unscrupulous company should be banned sooner. Everyone should support the judgment of the United States Commerce Department. The beacon of freedom and democracy can't be wrong. Momo's cat. The know-it-all above should get lost. If you like it so much, go wash dishes over there yourself. Frenzy Chemistry Class Representative. So-called free trade is just a joke. The United States doesn't even follow its own rules. When losing in business competition, just impose sanctions. Number 1 in double standards. The discussions continued online, with the majority of Hua country people supporting Tianyuan hair growth liquid. With over 80 million users in Hua country, the product has a large fan base. Plus, it's a fight against America, which really excites everyone, eager to watch the United States bustle. However, these various discussions did not stop the actions of the United States, which has long been accustomed to being criticized by others. Under pressure from the United States, particularly with the increase of tariffs on Mexican goods, within 3 days, Mexico was forced to declare a ban on Tianyuan hair growth liquid. At the same time, at the U.S.-Mexico border, U.S. police also stepped up their search and patrol efforts against smuggling, working hard to crack down on the issue. 10 days later, in Mexico, Lu City, inside a villa, Su Jie sat on a sofa, flipping through a newspaper. The newspaper had excerpts from the speech by the President of Mexico, which was about banning the circulation and importation of Tianyuan hair growth liquid. Mr. Su, the day before yesterday, one of our underground tunnels was discovered. The U.S. police blew up the tunnel and seized a batch of Tianyuan hair growth liquid, capturing quite a few of our people. Moreover, Mexico has enforced the ban, and now it's very difficult for us to bring Tianyuan hair growth liquid into the country by sea. Several ships carrying the liquid have been seized. Next to the sofa, Carter bent down, cautiously reporting on the recent news from the Tijuana group. These developments were highly disadvantageous for the current situation in Tijuana, for with the opium business cancelled, the group relied entirely on profits from Tianyuan hair growth liquid. In the short term, this blockade might have been inconsequential, but the longer it lasted, the more troublesome it would become. Su Jie put down the newspaper and said, 2 things. Go to Putu Logistics No. 8 warehouse. There, you will find a batch of hair growth original fluid for Tianyuan hair growth liquid. Follow the instructions and use some small factories for bottling. On Mexico's side, spend some money on customs. We've made so much, it's enough to shut their mouths. For the current predicament, Su Jie had long made preparations. He had transported a batch of hair growth original fluid in advance with a storage bag, planning to produce and sell it directly in Mexico. After all, this substance didn't require high production technology or conditions. As long as the hair growth original fluid was in place, any other material could be processed in just about any small factory. And there was no need to worry too much about Mexico's blockade orders. The somewhat chaotic system in Mexico, where bribery was rampant, proclaimed prohibitions. However, under the onslaught of money, the actual enforcement of these orders was questionable. Through these 2 preparations, most of the blockade could be neutralized. Mr. Su, did you anticipate this all along? Carter was somewhat shocked. Su Jie's words clearly indicated he had been prepared. Su Jie smiled, took out another map, and said lightly, "The Americans want to take over my business. Naturally, I won't just sit back and wait. Take this map. Everywhere marked on it represents a newly opened underground tunnel along the U.S.-Mexico border, enough for you to smuggle and counter the U.S. police's crackdown. All of these are?" Carter's eyes widened in disbelief upon seeing the dozens of marked underground tunnels on the map. How was this achieved? The Tijuana group had toiled for over a decade to establish only 7 or 8 smuggling tunnels, and discovering each one resulted in severe losses. Because underground tunnels are difficult and time-consuming to construct, there was the risk of collapses besides the physical and labor-intensive work involved. Underground tunnels had always been one of the most important assets for drug lords on the Mexico side. Whoever controlled more tunnels commanded a larger share of the opium market. Keep these to yourself and don't let me find you smuggling opium through them, or... Su Jie's voice was cold. To him, creating underground tunnels with the thousand-hand centipede was easy, far more effective than any tunnel boring machine. Just one drilling operation was all it took to smoothly carve out an underground tunnel several meters wide. It was impossible for U.S. police to block the smuggling routes completely. Absolutely not. Right now, selling Tianyuan hair growth liquid is more profitable than opium. No one will abandon the main pursuit for something less important, Carter assured, his face pale. He knew all too well how ruthless Su Jie's methods were. He had been working diligently for a while now, for he feared walking down the street might end with his head being blown off. Because of his fear, he sometimes felt like he was developing a psychological shadow. He always sensed that in the darkness, several pairs of eyes were watching him, no matter what he did. In reality, Carter's feeling was not misplaced. Only the eyes watching him were not those of snipers, but insects controlled by the insect control technique. With Su Jie's current spiritual power, he kept half of Tailu City under surveillance, keeping an eye on the Tijuana group's every move. Carter couldn't hide any small actions from him. As the United States began to impose sanctions, the smuggling industry was immediately dealt a significant blow. Especially in Mexico, under the pressure exerted by the United States, an unprecedented crackdown was demonstrated. The United States also sent a specialized investigation team to assist Mexico in cracking down on the smuggling of Tianyuan hair growth liquid. The behavior involving Tianyuan hair growth liquid was too egregious, and the United States Commerce Department could no longer tolerate it. If they didn't act, others might think the United States was a paper tiger, open to challenges from anyone. In an office building in Emo City, the capital of Mexico, Michael Canto, the person in charge of the smuggling task from the United States, sat in an office chair, browsing through a stack of documents. Michael Canto came from a formidable background. At only 45 years old, he was one of the most famous law enforcement elites in the United States in recent years, having solved numerous major cases and possessing an exceptionally impressive resume. This time, due to the Tianyuan hair growth liquid incident that had embarrassed the United States, he was specifically sent to assist in the investigation. Normally, it was very difficult to get approval for such international cases, and even Interpol didn't have this kind of authority. But it was the United States that made the request, and since Mexico was right next to the United States and had been taken advantage of for many years, it really didn't have much strength to refuse. Thus, Michael Canto led the team over. Near Michael Canto were dozens of elite personnel from the United States, some from the Commerce Department, some from law enforcement, and some from border management. They were all top talents drafted from various departments. Niddle, we hope that the Mexican officials can cooperate with us. Fighting smuggling benefits both countries, he said. At that moment, in front of Michael Canto, was a Mexican with slightly curly hair. He was the official sent by the Mexican government to coordinate with Michael Canto, named Niddle Raximpta. Rest assured, I have been directed by the president himself. I will fully cooperate with your operations. If there are any issues, just come to me, Niddle said, thumping his chest loudly in assurance. Boss, we've received a tip-off from an informant at the Mexican customs. Just then, a subordinate suddenly rushed over, speaking in a hushed tone. What? Come with me immediately, Michael Canto said, his face darkening. He immediately got up, grabbed his service weapon, and led a team of people driving at high speed toward the port. Nightfall. Michael Canto organized a group of elite troops to covertly stake out at the Samani port in Mexico, witnessing a scene that enraged him. As a cargo ship docked, the crew members were busy organizing the unloading of goods. At the unloading site, Individuals clearly part of gang members were swaggering around directing the scene, with several port officials smiling obsequiously nearby. The two groups were fraternal, warm towards each other to an excessive degree. "Boss, we have already notified the local police, and they will send someone to assist us," a subordinate whispered to him as he approached. "Good. Keep an eye on their movements." Michael Kanto was speaking when suddenly, he noticed the unloading area erupt into chaos. The leader of the gang received a phone call and immediately ordered everyone to get in the car and flee. "The news has leaked. Don't wait for police backup. Let's handle it ourselves." Michael Kanto quickly realized something was wrong, and seeing the gang escaping, he could no longer hold back, leading his team to swiftly strike. The apprehension was easier than expected. It seemed they were unprepared for their arrival, and some gang members hadn't even had time to get in the car before they were caught red-handed. That included the crew assisting at the scene and the dock officials, all of whom were arrested as well. As soon as they opened those unloading boxes, they were all filled with bottles of Tianyuan hair growth liquid, an astonishing quantity. Without the officials' permits, smuggling such large quantities via little boats would have been very difficult. After all, this wasn't opium, which is light and doesn't press down the hold, allowing a small boat to easily approach and unload. Seeing these stolen goods, Michael Kanto became even angrier. Thus, by the time Niddle arrived, some of the port's key officials had already been cornered in their office by Michael Kanto. "Mr. Michael, what are you doing?" Startled, Niddle hurried forward to intervene. Michael Kanto snorted coldly. "Ask these officials, involved with the gang, colluding in smuggling Tianyuan hair growth liquid. They must have taken the gang's dirty money." Niddle's face twitched. He quickly figured out what was happening and could only respond with bitter laughter. He was well aware of these officials' nature. Corruption among Mexican officials was hardly a new occurrence. "Mr. Michael, please calm down. We can talk this over slowly." "How can I calm down? Do you know, just after we had requested support from the local police station, the gang heard about it and ran away. Is this a police station or a den of thieves?" Michael Kanto slammed the table, visibly furious. Niddle was at a loss for words, knowing that given Mexico's local chaos and poverty and low police salaries, facing threats from various gangs, it was not uncommon for some police to turn a blind eye or even for special forces units to join forces with the cartel. This is the state of things in Mexico. Police and gangs often becoming indistinguishable. "Hey, you Americans, get out of my office. This isn't your country. You have no jurisdiction over us." At that moment, several port officials trapped in the office cursed at Michael Kanto, calling in the port area police to confront Michael Kanto's team. Their arrogant attitude only fueled Michael Kanto's rage further. "Mr. Michael, please withdraw your men." Niddle continued to persuade, striving to prevent a conflict from erupting. "You will regret this." Michael Kanto's face turned livid, and since he truly had no authority and this was Mexico, he was forced to bitterly lead his team away. Walking outside on the port road, Michael Kanto was still determined, saying, "Niddle, your country really needs to reform its bureaucracy. Look at the state of corruption. Those officials need to be dealt with to set an example and have a deterrent effect." "Mr. Michael, that's impossible. We have our national circumstances in Mexico, so you better not worry about these matters." Niddle dismissed the idea without a second thought. Given the lucrative nature of a port job, even a fool could guess these officials had powerful backers behind them. Who would dare mess with them lightly? Given the circumstances, Michael Kanto was helpless. This was a sovereign nation after all. Even if it often sought to appease the United States, it was beyond the influence of a mere special project leader. Facing such national conditions in Mexico, Niddle could only excitedly withdraw his team, but what he hadn't expected was the news he received 3 days later. Not only were the port officials left unprocessed, but even the gang members they had caught were released by the police, and all the confiscated Tianyuan hair growth liquid had vanished without a trace. The gang members escaped? A fire broke out in the police warehouse, and the confiscated Tianyuan hair growth liquid was burned? Are they treating me like a 3-year-old child? In the office building in Emo City, Michael Kanto looked at the explanations given by the police, almost laughing in anger. Niddle, do your country's officials have any bottom line at all? Niddle was extremely embarrassed. He couldn't outright tell Michael Kanto that the bottom line of officials in his country was that there was no limit. As long as it could make them money, they would dare to do what you could only dare to imagine. Forget it, arguing about this with you is pointless. I've received information that there's a production line for Tianyuan hair growth liquid in the Jimaken slums. I hope your police can work together with us to destroy it. Michael Kanto then took out a stack of documents, speaking in a serious tone. Going to Jimaken could be dangerous. Maybe we shouldn't go in after all. Niddle hesitated, showing his reluctance. I know, the security in the slums of Mexico is poor, so I requested the support of your police, and we have made preparations. Michael Kanto asserted, declaring that they were ready. Well, all right, I'll contact the police. After thinking it over, Niddle realized it wasn't good to keep refusing, otherwise the higher authorities in the United States would send letters to their president again. Emo City is the capital of Mexico, and it is a large city with a population exceeding 20 million. It's hard to imagine that a supermetropolis like Emo City still has slums. Jimaken is the largest slum in Emo City, where the astonishing number of 1.5 million destitute people gather. When Michael Kanto led the team along with a large group of police officers into this area, they couldn't help but frown. In the slum, makeshift shelters made of wood and tin kept appearing, where people who came to Mo City looking for opportunities and work settled due to their dire economic situations, gradually forming this enormous and chaotic slum. There are also slums in the United States, but most of them were formed after the decline of industrial cities, still using brick and concrete housing, which is completely different from those in Mexico. As they moved deeper, Michael Kanto gradually sensed that something was off, as the destitute gaze they met was not friendly at all. However, Michael Kanto soon had to ignore these concerns. He arrived in the central area of Jimaken, where he discovered dense small workshops, with workers numbering in the thousands. They saw batches of raw materials for hair growth liquid being brought in for simple production and manufacturing. For example, the simplest production of packaging bottles. Numerous small earth workshops were busy, with piles of PET materials being purchased and then formed through injection molding machines to complete the simple packaging bottles. The text on the packaging was exactly from the batch of Tianyuan hair growth liquid imported into the United States. Upon seeing these production workshops, Michael Kanto immediately fired into the air and shouted loudly, "Everyone put your hands on your head and squat down. This is a police operation." However, the expected scenario did not occur, and instead of obediently placing their hands on their head, the workers' eyes revealed a dangerous look. "These police are going to destroy our factory. If the factory is gone, we'll all starve," he said. "Kill them! Kill them! Kill them!" After a brief silence, workers fetched long and short guns from their rooms and fired through door cracks and window sills, their faces filled with a resolve to defend their homes at all costs. For these poor souls with nothing left but their lives, working in the production of Tianyuan hair growth liquid was a hard-earned job with generous benefits that supported entire families. Now that someone was threatening this livelihood, they would not back down, not even from the police. Bang, 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 bang. The slums erupted with gunfire in an instant. Mexico was awash with guns, and firearms circulated widely among civilians. The factories themselves were well-stocked and now handed out weapons to workers, transforming them into merciless militias. What was even more terrifying was that as the battle erupted on this front, it alarmed the vast majority of the slums. One by one, the poor grabbed guns and rushed to join the fight. Some were family members of the workers, others relied on the factory for food, and many more were spurred by the economic revitalization the hair growth liquid factory brought to the slums, voluntarily coming forth to repel the attackers. Bang! A Mexican police officer fell heavily to the ground, his heart pierced through by a bullet. A gun barrel peeked out from a hidden gap in the wall, aimed and fired, felling several figures. A special agent from the United States crouched around a corner, exchanging fire with those up ahead. Suddenly, the door beside him was quietly pushed open, and a few impoverished individuals wielding machetes shouted incoherent curses as they slashed down mercilessly, chopping him into an unrecognizable mess. A truck drove up, aimed at Michael Kanto's team, and rammed into them, flinging several people into the air. A large group of poor jumped out of the back of the truck, firing and slashing without a second word. Someone poured gasoline on the vehicles of Michael Kanto and others, igniting them in flames to vent their fury, completely destroying the vehicles. Those without weapons picked up rocks, beer bottles, slippers, and more, hurling them through the air, a chaotic flurry of debris soaring everywhere. The local populace in Mexico was extraordinarily fierce, striking with brutal ferocity. In just a few short minutes, Michael Kanto and his team had plunged into a vast ocean of people's warfare, being sniped from all directions. Leveraging their numerical and geographical advantages, Michael Kanto and his troops were beaten back in disarray, fleeing in panic. The Mexican police were the first to collapse, running faster than rabbits, wishing they had sprouted extra legs. Retreat, retreat quickly. Michael Kanto, too, started to panic, having never experienced such a scenario. Faced with these rioting people, he felt as if he had stirred up a hornet's nest. "I told you not to come here, but you just wouldn't believe it," Niddle said, his face a mask of regret, his guts turning green. He never expected things to get this serious. He had only heard the slums were unruly, but this was no mere lawlessness. It was like being on a battlefield. "Stop talking. Just run." Although Michael Kanto was skilled with a gun and hand-to-hand combat, and his team was indeed elite, they were embarrassingly outmatched. Despite being heavily outgunned, they managed to commandeer some vehicles and frantically charged out. However, once they cleared the slums and conducted a head count, only a third of those who entered survived to escape. Over two-thirds had left their lives behind forever. We've escaped." Niddle sat down on the ground with the joy of a narrow escape, his body covered in both blood and sweat. The terrifying sensation of bullets whizzing past his scalp from moments ago still left his heart palpitating. Old Bill, David, Serena, they didn't make it out. Michael Kanto's eyes were filled with self-reproach and regret. Those were elite agents from various departments of the United States, and now they all lay buried in the slums of Jimacan. Not even their bodies could be recovered. Such devastating casualties were unprecedented for Michael Kanto. "So you just run away, bastards? We help you destroy the smuggling factory, and this is how you betray us." At this, other special agents who saw their comrades dead or wounded couldn't help but yell angrily at the police who had escaped first. "It was you who insisted on going into the slums to provoke trouble. You insisted on dismantling people's factories, causing the death of many of our colleagues. You are the real cancer." The Mexican police were also filled with grievances. Normally they wouldn't enter the slums, but today they had lost many men aiding these Americans, and they had nowhere to vent their anger. "What did you say? If your police had done something, the slums wouldn't be in such chaos, allowing every thug to carry a gun. Heh, as if you Americans are any better. Shootings happen every day, and those chaotic slums in Dite City are also world famous." The argument between the two sides grew more heated, eventually escalating into a fight, fists flying in a free-for-all. "Enough, all of you stop it," Michael Kanto bellowed, putting a stop to the conflict. "Let's go." After a struggle to separate the fighters, Michael Kanto led his men to head back. In Mexico, they were always outsiders. Any conflict with local police would only put them at a disadvantage. "Mr.
Mikhail, I am sorry."
Niddle looked at Michael Kanto's grim face, not sure what else to say. "The mistake was mine. I underestimated the risks of the slum. The waters here are too deep." Michael Kanto let out a sigh, feeling the path to mission success was long and arduous. At the U.S.-Mexico border, a team of anti-smuggling patrol officers was driving towards a wasteland near the border, with no less than a dozen police cars on the road. They had received a tip-off about smuggling activities nearby, where traffickers of Tianyuan hair growth liquid were moving goods in bulk. Patrol Officer Charles, as he had done so many times before, drove on the rugged road, turning to his partner in the passenger seat with a smile. "Get ready. Our team is about to start the action soon. I hope we seize more contraband this time. The higher-ups are really focusing on this." The passenger was a rookie named Lana Peters, who had recently joined the Border Patrol. With her looks, she had plenty of admirers, Charles included. "I know. I'll shoot immediately if anything goes wrong." Lana nodded, her hand resting on the holster at her waist, visible tension on her face. "Don't be so nervous. We're only going after the guys smuggling Tianyuan hair growth liquid, not drug traffickers or illegal immigrants. They know their crimes are minor and they wouldn't dare to shoot back." Charles, a seasoned veteran of many years, reassured the rookie, seizing the opportunity to endear himself. "Hey, Charles, we're approaching the target area, but it's a bit close to the Mexican border. That's a disputed area between the two countries. We might be crossing the border here." The voice of a colleague came through the radio. "No worries, we'll make it quick and come right back. Just grab the people and return." Charles was unconcerned. They were the world's police. Arresting a criminal in a disputed area was no big deal, akin to American soldiers intervening in other countries' internal affairs under the pretext of anti-terrorism. Not a rare occurrence. Even if they did cross the border, it would be federal law that punished him, not Mexico. The convoy continued on, entering an endless expanse of desert, canyons, and hills bristling with cacti. "Once we get to the scene, we only need to make the arrest. Those smugglers have made a pretty penny, and there's a good amount to skim off them. As long as we—" Boom! Before Charles could finish, the lead police car exploded violently, as if something had blown it away. "What happened? What's going on?" Charles's face changed dramatically, and he bellowed into the walkie-talkie. As a response, an RPG fired from not far away hit another police car, blasting it into a twisted wreck. On a hillside, dozens of people lay in ambush, each armed with a variety of weapons, and opened fire on the police convoy, their gunshots blending together in a relentless barrage. Enemy attack, we've encountered armed assailants, location, request support. Charles slammed on the brakes and hurried out of the car with his long spear, using the police car as cover as he fired back at the enemy. Lana's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her gun and got out with the main force. Due to her nervousness and fear, her shots drifted skyward. Suddenly, the gunfire from the other side quieted down, as if the shooting had stopped. "They ran away, huh?" Muttering to himself, Charles turned to Lana beside him and said, "Looks like they were scared off. Those guys actually dared to resist. We can't let them go this time, no matter what." Seeking to showcase his heroic spirit, Charles cautiously stood up to scout the situation. Lana didn't speak. She only stared at the right side of the convoy with her pupils shrinking violently. Her teeth chattered as she desperately clung to Charles's arm. Following Lana's gaze, the next moment forced Charles to widen his eyes in shock. An infantry fighting vehicle with 6 wheels slowly ascended from the base of the hill, its dark 30mm machine gun aimed at their side of the police convoy. "Shit!" Charles cursed, and in the next instant, his body was blown apart, his blood splattering all over Lana's face and head. With the machine gun fire, the formidable weapon swept across the battlefield. The so-called cover of the police cars was like papier-mâché before the 30mm machine gun, and body parts flew everywhere. The counterattack by the police officers was pathetically weak because their equipment simply couldn't penetrate the armor of the infantry fighting vehicle. In just 1 minute, the machine gun turned the battlefield into a slaughterhouse. After unleashing a barrage of fire, the infantry fighting vehicle slowly retreated back into an underground tunnel, and the entire smuggling team vanished without a trace. By the time support police forces arrived, the scene was littered with limbs and body parts, and only Lana, who had lost an arm, was still alive. "Those people are not human. They deployed an infantry fighting vehicle. They are not ordinary smugglers." Lana's recount made all the police officers gasp in shock, staring at the deep tunnel entrance with a chill crawling up their spines. To face an infantry fighting vehicle in combat was something these officers had never encountered in their many years on the job. it felt exceptionally insane. We must chase them. We must bring those brutal smugglers to justice. The police forces at the scene were enraged. While requesting military support, they sent officers into the underground tunnel to try and pursue the fleeing enemies. But the officers who entered the tunnel hadn't gone far when they saw a wide claymore mine on the ground with "Front Toward Enemy" painted on it, and an infrared tripwire trigger device was active. Shit! A group of officers were terrified and tried to run, but by then it was too late. The activated claymore mine exploded in an instant, with hundreds of steel balls covering 60% of the arc in front, directly perforating the police officers in the tunnel into a honeycomb. Some steel balls even shot out of the entrance, hitting the unlucky ones observing from outside. The steel balls, with a range of tens of meters and designed as anti-personnel mines, were extremely powerful. The balls embedded into flesh and kept tearing through muscle, causing extreme damage and pain, filling the site with cries of agony for a moment. The remaining officers were stunned, a chill running from their feet to the top of their skulls, their minds filled with bewilderment and fear. Why were these smugglers of Tianyuan hair growth liquid so ferocious, even more ruthless than the drug lords they had encountered in the past? Deploying infantry fighting vehicles, claymore mines, rocket launchers, were they fighting a counterterrorism war? Mo City, United States Special Envoy Team Office Building. A gloomy atmosphere enveloped the place, like a depressive rainy day, with the whole team exuding an atmosphere of negativity and dejection. Since the failed operation in the slums a week ago, the United States Special Investigation Team had suffered heavy losses. Although the United States had subsequently replenished its staff, they faced difficult investigative situations, arrogant smugglers, colluding bureaucrats, and many lower-class people lured by heavy profits. All these instances were telling them that here in Mexico, they were the vulnerable group. Michael Canto sat on the couch, the ashtray in front of him piled up with cigarette butts. In just a week, he had aged 10 years, even developing gray hair. In 1 week, there have been multiple premeditated attacks targeting patrol officers at the border. Smugglers have changed their usual style, using a large number of powerful weapons, appearing and disappearing through underground tunnels, causing massive casualties. Our border patrols are now full of complaints. Even if they receive tips about smuggling activities, they dare not crack down easily anymore. Instead, they need to rely on the support from the military and the National Guard. Michael Canto looked at the latest intelligence report brought to him, his head spinning. Originally thinking it was just a smuggling case, who would have thought that these guys were crazier and more terrifying than drug lords, seemingly deliberately targeting the United States. Such madness was infuriating. Thinking about the recent incidents since he had come to Mexico, it had been one bad thing after another. All he heard were bad news, one after another, almost driving him insane. "Boss, someone is looking for you." At that moment, a subordinate rushed in, knocking on the door. "Who?" Michael Canto looked up. "Taya." The reporting subordinate had a strange expression on his face. Let him in." Michael Canto recalled what his former superior had mentioned in a cryptic manner before he left, that this smuggling case involved high-level officials, and he must be extremely cautious and careful. Soon, a Caucasian man entered the room. Dika Douglas, CIA-appointed Mexico Affairs Commissioner, responsible for this Tianyuan smuggling case. Dika extended his hand, his smile somewhat insincere.
Hello, I am Mikael.
"I heard you guys have suffered heavy casualties recently. Let our Central Intelligence Agency take over this case completely. You guys just assist us. We'll smooth everything out." Dika's tone was decisive, intending to take over the command right away. Michael Canto frowned as he looked at the other party, disliking his tone. "How do you plan on handling it? Those smugglers aren't easy to deal with." I understand. Tijuana is one of the largest gang organizations in Mexico, originally dealing in opium businesses with their stronghold in Taylu City. Before expanding, the organization had over 6,000 members. Now, by smuggling Tianyuan hair growth liquid, they attract poor people to join and have brought in instructors for military management and training. Plus, they're deeply enmeshed with local Mexican bureaucrats, You guys having no way to deal with them makes sense. Daika threw a pile of documents on the table all about the Tijuana organization, even clearly detailing how Carter had killed Juarez to rise to power. Tijuana is just the public face. The Tianyuan hair growth liquid comes from a regional warlord of Chan country. We at the CIA suspect that both parties have colluded with the intent of disrupting our market to make a huge profit. To take on such an organization, it was hard to strike overtly. The local military and police were just as unreliable, and we could only opt for a decapitation strategy. Within the Tijuana organization, we had contacted high-ranking insiders. Once Carter was dealt with, our people could quickly rise to power and take control of this large criminal group. By then, the smuggling channel for Tianyuan hair growth liquid would be cut off. Only by resolving the source in Chan country could the matter be completely settled. But to accomplish all these, your strength is still far from sufficient. Looking at the confident expression on Daika's face, and thinking of the CIA's rumors of bribery, assassination, supporting anti-government forces, and so forth, Michael Kanto's first interaction with them made him realize that the rumors were indeed not unfounded. If everything went as the CIA intended, then it might truly be possible to thoroughly resolve the issue. I wish you success, and I will have my team cooperate with you. Michael Kanto did not pursue power but instead offered his cooperation actively. Compared to a clash of egos, he preferred to seek justice for his deceased subordinates. A wise choice. Once Carter is dealt with, we can arrest him and hand him over to you for custody? Daika replied, smiling confidently, as if the operation had already succeeded before it had even started. After all, they were the renowned CIA who had dealt with terrorist groups and enemy governments and armed territorial forces. A mere drug lord was hardly considered a threat in their eyes. Oh! 2 days later, in Taelu City, in a high-rise flat, Su Jie was meditating. Threads of divine light spread around his body, and his divine soul leaped out from his head, gradually forming a face, now with a nose besides a mouth. Who? With a gentle breath from the divine soul, the white-boned tree leaves planted in the 5 elements spiritual soil unfolded continuously, and the tree's spiritual energy surged wildly, immensely absorbed into the body. This spiritual energy was already refined by the white-boned tree, but with Su Jie's divine soul nose taking shape, the human body gained another filter to compress and refine the spiritual power once more. This meant that with the same amount of spiritual power, Su Jie used less to achieve the same effect, effectively increasing his reserves of spiritual power. Slowly opening his eyes, the 9-grade sacred lotus on the 5 elements spiritual soil had now sprouted 3 cotyledons. The sacred lotus had grown a few more centimeters, now about 10 centimeters tall. Its stem tender and vibrantly green, cotyledons pure as jade, with natural patterns of tau flowing on them. He took out several mid-grade spirit stones and buried them in the 5 elements spiritual soil to fertilize the 9-grade sacred lotus. Susu, the cotyledons of the 9-grade sacred lotus fluttered, and a sky full of starlight and purple mist swirled up, as if jubilant, accelerating the circulation of spiritual power inside Su Jie's body. This exotic treasure, constantly surrounded by the sound of Tao, heavenly sound, and a myriad of auspicious purple mist, was immensely valuable just as a cultivation accelerator, gradually revealing its extraordinary nature. Su Jie reached out and gently touched the delicate cotyledons. Invisible sword chi autonomously acted to fend off any approaching entities. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of sword clangs vibrated as a low-grade beginner flying sword used for loosening soil immediately broke. Even in its nascent form, the 9-grade sacred lotus displayed such power. Despite the danger, Su Jie still touched it, the 1,000-handed centipede crawling up his arm to help him fend off the sword chi. Su Jie imprinted his own aura onto the 9-grade sacred lotus, slowly refining it. With such an exotic treasure, an innate spiritual object, it was very difficult to refine it for personal use. Su Jie hoped to start refining it from a young stage to reduce the difficulties of use in the future. Grow quickly. After observing the 9-grade sacred lotus for a while, Su Jie heard footsteps behind him, got up, tidied up his cultivation items, and finally put away the protective array map.
Su Jie carteris here.
A pair of lotus-like arms reached from behind, wrapping around Su Jie's waist. I'll go have a chat with him. Patting Lu Yingying's pert bottom, Su Jie stood up and walked into the living room. Mr. Su. Carter was standing there, having been called by Su Jie. Step by step, Su Jie walked to the balcony, from where he could overlook the entirety of Tailu City. Mr. Su, we've achieved considerable success in our operations this week, Carter said with excitement. His drug traffickers, after training, utilized underground tunnels to significantly challenge the Border Patrol's spirit. This could not have been achieved by his drug lords alone since their training was still lacking. Many were elite soldiers from Jekka Security, drafted to operate various heavy weaponry. Carter, are you loyal to me? Faced with Carter's excitement, Su Jie suddenly asked a seemingly unrelated question. Carter was taken aback. He immediately knelt down and lay prone on the floor, saying, Mr. Su, my loyalty to you is unwavering. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in the position I am today. Good. I need you to do something to prove this loyalty, Su Jie said. Writing an address on a piece of paper, Su Jie spoke indifferently. Kill everyone at this place. In our Hua country, this is called submitting a name card. With your loyalty, I trust you won't disappoint me. Third Community Fondant Building? Carter raised his head, not understanding what was special about this location. Inside, a group of CIA operatives and a United States Special Forces team have arrived. They plan to launch a decapitation strike to eliminate the heads of Tijuana and eradicate the smuggling network. You see how good I am to you, informing you in advance about the danger. Now, what you need to do is treat these people as prey. Understood. CIA, we're to kill the CIA, Carter said. Carter's pupils constricted sharply. This was the United States Central Intelligence Agency, the famous world's strongest military intelligence organization, backed by the global hegemon. If they touched their people, it was hard to imagine the kind of retaliation they would face. If you're afraid, you can just sit quietly and wait for them to take off your head. I won't force you, Su Jie said, imposing psychological pressure with his words, to firm up the other's resolve. A fierce look flashed across Carter's face. Born a drug lord, he had a ruthless heart. Grinding his teeth, he said, Mr. Su, I understand what to do. If those CIA agents dare come here, I absolutely won't let them leave. This is my territory in Mexico, and I'll make them understand the consequences of encroaching on my turf. I'll await your good news, and also the team isn't pure anymore. Eliminate a group, Su Jie instructed. Waving his hand and tossing out a piece of paper, Carter caught it reflexively and saw the names written on it. Several were his close aides. Cold sweat broke out instantly, and a vicious light flickered in his eyes. Mr. Su, I will hang all traitors, Carter stated firmly. Go handle it. Yes. After Carter left, Su Jie chuckled to himself. Things are getting more and more interesting. The CIA's notoriety is known worldwide, and its presence is felt in the subversion of many hostile regimes. This time they even mobilized for Tianyuan hair growth liquid. Who knows what interests Aster Pharmaceutical has promised them. Mr. Carter, having just walked out of the Grand Flat, hadn't yet gotten into his car when two loud thuds of heavy objects hitting the ground were heard. Turning his head, he saw two bodies plummeting from the neighboring high-rise. Security guards went to check and found they were gang members and discovered surveillance equipment on the corpses. It was Mr. Su who helped me clear the trouble. Mr. Carter raised his head, barely making out Mr. Su's solitary figure on the balcony, and immediately understood the situation, his face growing darker. It seems it was indeed CIA personnel who had already begun to monitor his movements. Drive back. Tell the brothers in the gang to arm themselves. We're going on a killing spree. With a cold command, a murderous intent surged in Mr. Carter's eyes. The Third Community Fondant Building. Located in the city center, it was one of the earliest constructed old houses, but with urban redevelopment, it had been neglected and was ordered to be evacuated and demolished to make way for new property sales. Daika was currently in one of the houses, scribbling on a map surrounded by the elite of the CIA's field operatives from Special Action Division Group A, consisting of 12 members all with rich combat experience, either active duty or retired military. Unlike the office workforce specializing in intelligence gathering and political work, the field operatives were the CIA's sharp blades, mainly engaged in assassination, sabotage, raids, ambushes, and so on, occasionally training foreign insurgents and leading them in combat. In addition to the field operatives, a Delta Special Team was also called in to coordinate with this operation, totaling 25 members of the elite forces of the United States military. Carter is a cautious man with as many as 12 residences, and the place where he rests each night is a spur-of-the-moment decision. To strike, we must first determine his whereabouts. Michael Kanto sat on the couch. For this operation, Michael Kanto had brought his subordinates to Taelu City. At that moment, another man with a robust build and fierce demeanor, a black man, slowly spoke. "We're only responsible for eliminating the target. It's up to you to pinpoint the enemy's location." His name was Jackin James, captain of the Delta Force. "Don't worry, we have informants in Tijuana, and they will provide the intel. Pinning down Carter's location won't be difficult." Daika pointed to a residence on the map and chuckled lightly. "He certainly won't expect that one of his loyal bodyguards is also on our payroll. What's the plan for taking action?" "Same as usual, we'll conduct a helicopter-borne raid, with support from fixed-wing platforms, drones, and satellites. The attack will take place from midnight to early morning, taking advantage of the darkness. Our side has excellent night vision equipment, allowing us to achieve unilateral transparency on the battlefield, which is highly advantageous in capturing the target." Jackin James pounded the map with a heavy fist, his tone decisive. "No problem. I will contact the Mexican officials and have the higher-ups authorize our operation so the aircraft can cross the border." Michael Kanto spoke, noting that armed raids required coordination with Mexican officials. Otherwise, helicopters would not be easily deployed. "There's an even easier way. Send a few missiles from a Predator drone to this man named Carter's residence, and everything would be solved." Jackin James expressed some regret, as such precise targeted decapitation would be much simpler. "We need a live capture. The Tijuana crime syndicate has been provoking us through smuggling. We must capture a live suspect and bring them back for trial to have a sufficient deterrent effect." Daika directly refuted. Capturing Carter was not the primary reason. They needed to bring down the entire Tijuana group. It was also a demonstration of power against the backers of companies like Jekka and Tianyuan Daily, and the local warlord of Chan Country, Su Jie. If they could force the adversary to hand over Tianyuan hair growth liquid directly, that would be ideal, but if not, they could still showcase the unparalleled strength of the United States, showing how foolish it was to think a crime syndicate could challenge the U.S. "Boss, something doesn't seem right." As Daika and his men were discussing their next move, a sudden voice came through the walkie-talkie, as the lookouts sent out an alert. Daika quickly stood up, pushed open the window, and looked outside, just in time to see several drones circling overhead. "Binoculars." Daika's expression changed slightly, as it was still the afternoon. With several drones flying over, there must be a problem. The moment he picked up the binoculars, Daika saw a scene that made his eyelids twitch. On the streets, members of the Tijuana group were streaming through the alleys, converging on the third community building from all directions. "Damn, our movements have been leaked. Organize the team to retreat immediately." Daika swore, unsure where the error had occurred. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The first Tijuana members to reach the third community had already engaged with the outer CIA security team. The sound of gunfire startled the nearby residents, who, accustomed to the chaos of Mexico, swiftly fled with their heads covered. The members of Tijuana, ignoring these civilians, quickly broke through the blockade and reached the base of the building, thanks to their overwhelming numbers. Assault team, set up a two-tiered line of fire. Snipers act at your discretion, prioritizing enemy machine gunners. Emergency support teams stand by for reinforcement, ensure logistical ammunition supply and casualty treatment. Also, get me in touch with the United States Special Operations Command, report our situation, request air support, and arrange our evacuation. Jackin, truly an elite of the Delta Force, remained fearless in the face of sudden danger and calmly issued combat orders. Dika's face was somber as he picked up his phone and dialed CIA headquarters to report the situation. Michael Canto also made a hurried call to the high-ranking officials in Mexico and hung up after 1 minute. The Mexican police and military will come to support us, but it will take time. No matter, they can't break in. Jaquen glanced at the battle that had broken out below and was very confident in his team. Once inside the community building, the Tijuana members with their numerical advantage quickly found themselves in trouble. The cramped and complex indoor environment hindered their advance, and their bravado was no match for the elite special forces. After dozens of them died in the corridors, the others became hesitant and afraid to move forward. These gang members might handle fighting the police, but they were no match for the well-trained special forces, whose true capabilities quickly came to light. Meanwhile, outside the third community building, Carter, who was commanding the operation, looked displeased. "Call the Zatasi forces to strike." Carter issued the command coldly, as a group of Tijuana members with a distinctly different bearing appeared on the battlefield. They were dressed in full sets of advanced gear and moved with trained precision. They were few in number, only about 30, formerly soldiers of Mexico's Air Mobile Special Forces who had defected to Tijuana for money, becoming its most elite assault force. The Zatasi members quickly exploited a gap to infiltrate the building, engaging in fierce gunfights with Delta Force inside, causing significant casualties. However, amidst the crossfire, the battle attracted other actors. The sound of helicopters circled above, while sirens blared on the ground. An armed helicopter flew in at low altitude, ready to provide fire support. It was a Mexican military aircraft summoned by the CIA for assistance. Not far away, 2 more aircraft flew in, heading straight for the rooftop of the community building. It seemed they planned to land on the rooftop and evacuate everyone inside. "Carter, how long do you plan to keep this up?" Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind Carter. "How did you get here, Mr. Su?" Carter turned around and was instantly startled. "You turned a battle of annihilation into a siege. Do you plan to spend 1 hour or 2 to finish this fight? By then, the CIA personnel will have long since fled." Su Jie's tone was indifferent, making Carter feel quite embarrassed. "Mr. Su, those elite special forces inside the building are really tough to deal with. Our people are going all out, but the casualties are a bit heavy. Who told you to engage in a shooting match with special forces? Why haven't you brought in the armored units I trained you to use? When facing such enemies, just use heavy firepower to cover the area indiscriminately and get your men out of there. If you continue to drag this out, air support from within the United States will arrive." Su Jie waved his hand, watching the armed helicopters that were providing suppressive fire overhead. At this moment, the support troops from JECA Security arrived at the scene. Bang! 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 Several JECA Security personnel picked up shoulder-launched air defense missiles and fired after a brief aim. Accompanied by the dull sound of launch, the missiles rapidly ascended, hitting the armed helicopters which were flying too low to evade, despite using flares. They were hit by 2 missiles in succession and fell from the sky, black smoke trailing behind them. More JECA security forces arrived majestically with a dozen armored vehicles, tanks, and self-propelled grenade launchers, all brought into Mexico directly through storage bags. On a concealed windowsill of the community building, Sniper Jamie and Spotter Harlan Ben were carrying out their sniping mission. Number 19. With another bang, a life was taken effortlessly. After killing someone, Jamie's eyes remained undisturbed. The messy drug traffickers he killed held no pressure for him, except for a brief challenge from his Atasi sniper squad that he had counter-sniped earlier. Ordinary gang members were merely toys under his sniper rifle. These gangs think numbers will make a difference, that killing a few others will scare the rest into retreating. Harlan Ben scoffed with a contemptuous smile, then patted his old partner's shoulder. "There's a target at 11 o'clock on the street corner. Number 20. The scope locked onto a gang member peeking out from the street corner. As Jamie was about to pull the trigger, the gang member ducked back like a startled rabbit. The ground trembled slightly. A massive object emerged from around the corner. With a hemispherical turret, a 125mm smoothbore gun, and dark green paint, explosive reactive armor plates were affixed to the vehicle's body, weighing tons. The turret rotated, and a flash from the barrel followed. Boom! Bricks and stones flew, and gun smoke filled the air. Jamie suddenly felt a warmth in his lower body. Glancing aside, he saw that Spotter Harlan had been crushed to death by pieces of fallen concrete. The reason for the warmth in his lower body was that his legs had been severed. Why wasn't there any intel on the enemy having tanks? Jamie curled up in pain. His pupils dilated as he watched a dozen armored units rolling onto the streets, their dark barrels pointing this way. Boom, 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 boom. The 155mm self-propelled howitzers demolished large swaths of reinforced concrete buildings with each shell, blood and flesh scattering with the flying concrete. The 30mm machine guns of the infantry fighting vehicles fired incessantly, boring large holes into the walls. If someone were behind those walls, they would be split in half. Tanks rolled down the streets, approaching for direct fire while their mounted machine guns provided continuous suppression. Wherever there was gunfire from the community building, it was immediately met with several shells, and in an instant, the entire world fell silent. From a distance, Su Jie watched this scene, a bloodthirsty smile on his lips. He chuckled. What age are we living in that they're still playing at sniping? No matter how strong your flesh and blood, or how elite the special forces are, when faced with heavy artillery fire, there's only one way out: death, unless you're a cultivator, of course. As the bombardment continued, the entire community building was on the verge of collapse, and the death toll inside was horrendous. There will be big news tomorrow. 40 to 50 elite troops dead here. The famous Black Hawk downed with only 19 fatalities. I wonder what charges they will pin this time. Thinking of the interesting scenes, Su Jie's smile grew even more intense. Third community building. Inside a severely damaged house, Jacken's mangled body lay on the ground, already devoid of warmth. Daika had a steel rebar piercing through his thigh, and his face was pale due to excessive blood loss. Across from him, Michael still held a submachine gun, staying with the last few remaining survivors. Some were CIA agents, others were elite soldiers from the Delta Special Forces, but now they all looked as ragged as refugees. Everyone. I underestimated the enemy's ferocity. Daika pulled painkillers from his pocket and swallowed them in one gulp, then injected his thigh with a needle. How could the enemy have so many armored units? Michael's voice was dull as he glanced down at the tanks and self-propelled grenade launchers continuously bombarding below, each blast shaking their hearts like a heavy hammer, causing agitation and chaos. Cough, cough. I'm afraid this can't be separated from that warlord in Chan country. Our intelligence showed that they only deployed infantry fighting vehicles. We never expected them to bring tanks. Daika coughed dryly. In Mexico, although drug lords were rampant, conflicts were generally gunfights focused, and utilizing heavy machine guns was considered significant firepower. Deploying tanks and grenade launchers was practically unheard of. Only that insane warlord named Su Jie would do such a thing. Michael, try to break out with them. Feeling the building shaking and on the verge of collapse, even making creaking noises, Daika spoke again. The United States aircraft will arrive in 8 minutes, the helicopter rapid response team in 31 minutes, and the Mexican military ground forces won't arrive for another 2 hours. Leave now. I remember there's a manhole cover not far from the building. You guys can escape through the sewer. Daika, what about you? I'll stay here. I misjudged the strength of the enemy, which is my due reward. Besides, with the condition of my body, I can't escape with you. Michael fell silent for a moment, then took the recorder and identity token that Daika handed him. He made eye contact with the other survivors, nodded and said, "Take care." After speaking, Michael left behind a handgun with a single bullet in it and then led the team charging out of the building. Meanwhile, Daika, hearing the ever-closer sound of tank treads and the dull bombardment, slowly took out the handgun and put it in his mouth. His mind was filled with vital intelligence. He wasn't sure if he could withstand torture if captured alive. I hope the boss takes this enemy seriously to avoid repeating our mistakes. Daika was about to pull the trigger when suddenly the floor beneath him shook, and a 155mm shell blasted into the room. Damn! The last curse wasn't uttered as Daika, along with the floor, was engulfed by the blinding explosion. Boom! As Michael hastily fled the third community building, he turned back to see the building collapsing under continuous bombardment, plumes of dust obscuring the view. Good opportunity. Michael put on a gas mask and, using the dust from the collapsing building for cover, led the remaining few towards the manhole. Bang! Suddenly, one person in the group fell hard to the ground, his head bursting open. Bang! 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 Several gunshots rang out again, and 3 members of the team were shot in the head. Michael couldn't believe it and looked up toward the direction from which the gunshots were coming. Despite the dust and ash obscuring the vision, how had the enemy sniper spotted him and his team? Thermal imaging, perhaps? Before Michael could figure out what was happening, his head too burst open like a balloon, and all his thoughts and consciousness faded away. From a distance, Su Jie dropped the Barrett sniper rifle in his hand and said to Carter beside him, "It's done. Notify everyone to retreat, unless you want to face retaliatory bombing by the United States." Sitting upright with a serious demeanor, Carter immediately picked up the walkie-talkie. Operation successful. Everyone retreat from the scene. Su Jie slowly walked downstairs and said, "Go collect some identity tokens and take photos at the bodies, and then issue a statement in the name of the Tijuana group, claiming that we annihilated a CIA and Delta team this afternoon." This, all right. Carter was slightly taken aback. This act was practically provoking the United States, much like terrorists claiming responsibility for a bombing attack. Now, it was impossible for the United States to cover this up and pretend ignorance. Su Jie walked downstairs, got into a black sedan driven by a member of JECA security. On the battlefield, the Tijuana members loaded into pickups and trucks and departed. About a dozen armored units also started their tracks and turned to leave the streets. As they passed a street, police lined up on both sides, staring dumbfounded at the tanks and infantry fighting vehicles passing by, too shocked to move, just dumbly watching the scene as if sending off the convoy. The retreat took just a few minutes, and the Tijuana group members dispersed locally, while the armored units entered a warehouse. Not until the Tijuana group completely left the area did the sirens, which had been sounding for a long time, approach the battlefield, and a group of Mexican police cautiously moved closer. In fact, they had arrived earlier, but faced with the ferocious Tijuana group and the terrifying bombardment from about a dozen armored vehicles, they, armed only with light weapons, were too scared to approach, merely watching the scenario unfold from a distance. Shortly after, the sound of fighter jets swooshed through the sky. These were jets from a certain United States Air Force base that had urgently armed and taken off, authorized to enter Mexican airspace. The Mexican police looked up to see several small black dots detach from the belly of the aircraft. Several missiles dropped from high above, accurately striking the warehouse where the armored units had entered. The intense explosion shattered the warehouse, lifting flames tens of meters high and producing shockwaves that swept in all directions. However, what the jets in the sky didn't know was that the warehouse had connected underground tunnels, and the armored units had already evacuated through the tunnels, rendering the missile attack futile. Soon, more and more support arrived, including Mexican military forces, airdropped special forces sent by the United States, and specialized investigation teams, all arriving at the ruins of the third community within a few hours of the incident. As the remains of body after body were dug up, each bearing the identity of the CIA and Delta Force, the Mexican military at the scene were momentarily speechless, wondering if the Tijuana group had gone mad to commit such an act. And as for the personnel from the United States, their expressions were even more grim. For many years, few organizations had dared to provoke the authority of the United States like this. This anger and humiliation engulfed every United States personnel present, and when they saw the recent announcement from the Tijuana group claiming responsibility for the incident, their suppressed rage finally erupted. Many declared their resolve to eradicate this dangerous criminal organization. Third Community Building. Inside a severely damaged house, Jackin's mangled body lay on the ground, already devoid of warmth. Daika had a steel rebar piercing through his thigh, and his face was pale due to excessive blood loss. Across from him, Michael still held a submachine gun, staying with the last few remaining survivors. Some were CIA agents, others were elite soldiers from the Delta Special Forces, but now they all looked as ragged as refugees. Everyone. I underestimated the enemy's ferocity. Daika pulled painkillers from his pocket and swallowed them in one gulp, then injected his thigh with a needle. How could the enemy have so many armored units? Michael's voice was dull as he glanced down at the tanks and self-propelled grenade launchers continuously bombarding below, each blast shaking their hearts like a heavy hammer, causing agitation and chaos. Cough, cough. I'm afraid this can't be separated from that warlord in Chan country. Our intelligence showed that they only deployed infantry fighting vehicles. We never expected them to bring tanks. Daika coughed dryly. In Mexico, although drug lords were rampant, conflicts were generally gunfights focused, and utilizing heavy machine guns was considered significant firepower. Deploying tanks and grenade launchers was practically unheard of. Only that insane warlord named Su Jie would do such a thing. Michael tried to break out with them. Feeling the building shaking and on the verge of collapse, even making creaking noises, Daika spoke again. The United States aircraft will arrive in 8 minutes, the helicopter rapid response team in 31 minutes, and the Mexican military ground forces won't arrive for another 2 hours. Leave now. I remember there's a manhole cover not far from the building. You guys can escape through the sewer. Daika, what about you? I'll stay here. I misjudged the strength of the enemy, which is my due reward. Besides, with the condition of my body, I can't escape with you. Michael fell silent for a moment, then took the recorder and identity token that Daika handed him. He made eye contact with the other survivors, nodded and said, "Take care." After speaking, Michael left behind a handgun with a single bullet in it and then led the team charging out of the building. Meanwhile, Daika, hearing the ever-closer sound of tank treads and the dull bombardment, slowly took out the handgun and put it in his mouth. His mind was filled with vital intelligence. He wasn't sure if he could withstand torture if captured alive. I hope the boss takes this enemy seriously, to avoid repeating our mistakes. Daika was about to pull the trigger when suddenly the floor beneath him shook, and a 155mm shell blasted into the room. Damn! The last curse wasn't uttered as Daika, along with the floor, was engulfed by the blinding explosion. Boom! As Michael hastily fled the third community building, he turned back to see the building collapsing under continuous bombardment, plumes of dust obscuring the view. Good opportunity. Michael put on a gas mask and, using the dust from the collapsing building for cover, led the remaining few towards the manhole. Bang! Suddenly, one person in the group fell hard to the ground, his head bursting open. Bang! 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 Several gunshots rang out again, and 3 members of the team were shot in the head. Michael couldn't believe it and looked up toward the direction from which the gunshots were coming. Despite the dust and ash obscuring the vision, how had the enemy sniper spotted him and his team? Thermal imaging, perhaps? Before Michael could figure out what was happening, his head too burst open like a balloon, and all his thoughts and consciousness faded away. From a distance, Su Jie dropped the Barrett sniper rifle in his hand and said to Carter beside him, "It's done. Notify everyone to retreat, unless you want to face retaliatory bombing by the United States." Sitting upright with a serious demeanor, Carter immediately picked up the walkie-talkie. Operation successful. Everyone retreat from the scene. Su Jie slowly walked downstairs and said, "Go collect some identity tokens and take photos at the bodies, and then issue a statement in the name of the Tijuana group, claiming that we annihilated a CIA and Delta team this afternoon." This? All right. Carter was slightly taken aback. This act was practically provoking the United States, much like terrorists claiming responsibility for a bombing attack. Now, it was impossible for the United States to cover this up and pretend ignorance. Su Jie walked downstairs, got into a black sedan driven by a member of JECA security. On the battlefield, the Tijuana members loaded into pickups and trucks and departed. About a dozen armored units also started their tracks and turned to leave the streets. As they passed a street, police lined up on both sides, staring dumbfounded at the tanks and infantry fighting vehicles passing by, too shocked to move, just dumbly watching the scene as if sending off the convoy. The retreat took just a few minutes, and the Tijuana group members dispersed locally, while the armored units entered a warehouse. Not until the Tijuana group completely left the area did the sirens, which had been sounding for a long time, approach the battlefield, and a group of Mexican police cautiously moved closer. In fact, they had arrived earlier, but faced with the ferocious Tijuana group and the terrifying bombardment from about a dozen armored vehicles, they, armed only with light weapons, were too scared to approach, merely watching the scenario unfold from a distance. Shortly after, the sound of fighter jets swooshed through the sky. These were jets from a certain United States Air Force base that had urgently armed and taken off, authorized to enter Mexican airspace. The Mexican police looked up to see several small black dots detach from the belly of the aircraft. Several missiles dropped from high above, accurately striking the warehouse where the armored units had entered. The intense explosion shattered the warehouse, lifting flames tens of meters high and producing shockwaves that swept in all directions. However, what the jets in the sky didn't know was that the warehouse had connected underground tunnels, and the armored units had already evacuated through the tunnels, rendering the missile attack futile. Soon, more and more support arrived, including Mexican military forces, airdropped special forces sent by the United States, and specialized investigation teams, all arriving at the ruins of the third community within a few hours of the incident. As the remains of body after body were dug up, each bearing the identity of the CIA and Delta Force, the Mexican military at the scene were momentarily speechless, wondering if the Tijuana group had gone mad to commit such an act. And as for the personnel from the United States, their expressions were even more grim. For many years, few organizations had dared to provoke the authority of the United States like this. This anger and humiliation engulfed every United States personnel present, and when they saw the recent announcement from the Tijuana group claiming responsibility for the incident, their suppressed rage finally erupted. Many declared their resolve to eradicate this dangerous criminal organization. Recently, our Tijuana group carried out a military operation in Telu City, eliminating a bunch of foreign spies who had secretly crossed the border. These spies were not only a threat to national security, but were also suspected of espionage, assassination, and bribery, exhibiting outright terrorist behavior. Upholding anti-terrorism, we decisively struck and returned peace and quiet to Mexico. An announcement from the Tijuana group of Mexico went viral online, complete with photos and videos, clearly showing the gruesome deaths of the CIA and Delta Force operatives. United States. At CIA headquarters, a special meeting was convened once again. In attendance were not only high-ranking CIA official Judith, United States Army Special Operations Command Lieutenant General Sean Fernandez, but also White House senior official Jameson Fofana. Before these individuals lay a report defined as the 4.14 case investigation reality. Looking at the casualty list reported by the investigation team, 12 elite CIA field agents, 25 Delta Force special operators, and 15 investigators of the Tianyuan hair growth liquid smuggling case, along with Daika, Jackin, and Michael, made for a staggering 55 people who had died in Telu City. Unforgivable. Sean's expression turned to steel. Unable to contain his fury, he bellowed, 55 lives, this Tijuana group, is deliberately provoking us. We must uproot this organization entirely. Judith activated the multimedia, displaying Su Jie's photo. This person is likely the mastermind behind the current case. He controls several enterprises, one of which is the Tianyuan Daily, the manufacturer of Tianyuan hair growth liquid, and the biggest beneficiary of the Tianyuan smuggling case. He is also the actual controller of a local warlord in Chan country, commanding a military force of over 10,000, with significant influence in East Chin state. As she spoke, Judith scrolled through the PPT, detailing Su Jie's profile. Included were his controlled assets, overt and covert, life and connections, as well as his current movements. Currently, We have reason to believe that this dangerous individual has not appeared in Hua country or Chan country for several days. We suspect that he has come to Mexico and is directing the Tijuana group behind the scenes. White House senior official Hameson, frowning, interrupted Judith coldly. I don't want to hear this nonsense. When can you arrest this person? Are you aware of how detrimental this incident has been? I demand you resolve this matter swiftly. Can we send regular troops into Mexico? Judith asked directly. Mexico was right next to the United States. If they could send in troops, they could easily clamp down on Tijuana. They won't agree to it. Right now, anti-American sentiment in Mexico is severe. If we send in the military, do you want our country to be overwhelmed by those illegal immigrants? When a large number of refugees remain, will the CIA take responsibility for them? Without a second thought, Hameson immediately refused, aware that Mexico shared thousands of kilometers of border with the United States that seemed ready for an invasion at any moment. But the reality was that Mexico was a mess. Its political situation was chaotic, poverty was rampant, and it was rife with drugs and violence. If they were to wage an anti-terrorism war in such a country, it would be not only unprofitable but also a source of endless trouble. Furthermore, if war broke out, the impoverished Mexicans would have even more reason to flee to the United States. A border spanning thousands of kilometers could not be plugged by a mere border wall. Sending military is not an option. Mexico is not the Middle East, and waging a war there won't be that simple. Not only did Hameson of the White House's upper echelons oppose sending troops, but so did Sean, a hawkish figure within the military. The United States and Mexico are simply too close to each other. Rashly deploying the military would only mean facing smugglers akin to guerrillas, blended among urban civilians. According to the United States' past military experience in the Middle East, this type of public order battle has always met poor performance by the United States, with too high a casualty rate among innocent civilians, likely stirring up immense resentment among the populace. Before long, the enemy wouldn't be vanquished, yet such actions could provoke Mexicans to adopt extremist ideologies. This was not the Middle East, separated from the United States by vast oceans, but neighboring Mexico, where Mexicans could easily come over, 1,000 times easier than Middle Easterners entering the United States. If Mexicans were to start resorting to terrorist attacks, employing human bombs and the like, it would truly be a tragedy. Then, apart from targeting the high-ranking figures of the Tijuana organization, we must also aim at Jeca Security, that local warlord in Chan country, eradicating their roots, otherwise we'd only be treating the symptoms, not the disease. Judith thought for a moment and proposed a plan. Targeting the Tijuana group certainly was feasible, but as long as the profits from Tianyuan hair growth liquid were on the table, Su Jie could easily support a second and third Tijuana. Eradicating one Tijuana would just lead to thousands more. As for Chan country, since it's rather close to Hua country, it's not appropriate to declare war openly. However, we can send secret forces to participate in the form of instructors and mercenaries. After some thought, Hameson offered this response and continued, You folks at the CIA sort this out on your own. I know you want a piece of the pie from Tianyuan hair growth liquid, but this mess was of your own making. Don't expect us to wipe your butts for you. Judith's eyes flashed with a sharp light, turning to look at Sean, hoping for the military's support. I will have the forces stationed in Lion City and Luzon assist you, and additionally, I'll deploy a number of special forces to join the battle, Sean said. Sean didn't refuse. In a place like Chan country, where a mere local warlord stood, the heavenly soldiers of the United States could easily crush the opponent upon arrival. Judith let out a sigh of relief. With the military's assurance, the task ahead seemed much more manageable. In any case, this Su Jie must be arrested and brought to the United States for a public trial. Hameson finally declared the case, placing the highest target on the dangerous individual Su Jie. An enemy that dared challenge the hegemony of the United States had to be decisively eliminated. The very next morning, 12 hours after the 4.14 incident took place, the White House press secretary convened a press conference. Facing a crowd of reporters, the spokesperson expressed outrage. Just 12 hours ago, our deployed forces in Mexico, striking at the local drug lords, were attacked by the Tijuana criminal organization, resulting in a total of 55 deaths. The assailant used heavy firepower in a cruel manner, infringing upon and trampling the peaceful intentions of the free world. Hereby, we designate the Tijuana criminal organization as an extreme terrorist group, engaged in activities such as smuggling, opium, and human trafficking. We will spare no effort in our fight to destroy this extreme terrorist organization. The audience erupted in surprise, with reporters initially thinking the United States was about to declare war on Mexico, asking questions excitedly. Mexico is our ally. We will not go to war with them. I want to make it clear that we are only targeting the extreme terrorist organization Tijuana, the spokesperson promptly explained, leaving the reporters, who seemed to thrive on stirring the pot, somewhat disappointed. The United States government's proclamation caused a huge uproar. There are still many capable people in the world, and soon enough some knowledgeable folks uncovered many secrets about the Tijuana group. Its original identity was as a notorious opium smuggler in Mexico. Later, they began to smuggle Tianyuan hair growth liquid. The group that was wiped out in Telu City was actually the CIA and active United States military forces, most likely aiming to capture the heads of the Tijuana organization. After all, not long before, the United States had just announced the delisting of Tianyuan hair growth liquid, followed by the smuggling incident, which was a major embarrassment for the United States. According to the style of the United States, it was only natural that they would not let the Tijuana get away with smuggling Tianyuan hair growth liquid and that sending personnel to capture them was reasonable. It's just that the capture operation ended in disaster, not only failing to catch the Tijuana leaders but also being completely annihilated themselves. With such reasoning put forth, the entire sequence of events became clear, which also attracted a large crowd of onlookers to the spectacle. The United States labels Tijuana as an extremist terrorist organization, but how do you explain the CIA and Delta Force's presence in Telu City? That's not American territory. To the person above, the United States is the world police, and Mexico is just their toilet, so sending personnel there to capture criminals is just normal. Do you actually expect the United States to truly respect the sovereignty of other nations? This organization called Tijuana really isn't afraid of death, daring to make trouble so close to the United States.
I'm impressed.
Hopeless, even if the United States doesn't send troops, just carrying out decapitation strategies would mean Tijuana won't last many days. Good riddance. Tijuana should take out more of the CIA, let them stop causing trouble all over the world. So you also have days like this, going to others' territory trying to capture people, really thought they wouldn't dare to kill? Support the beacon of the world in eliminating extremist terrorist organizations. The sooner Tijuana is destroyed, the better it is for humanity. Talking about extremist terrorist organizations, it's just about coveting the profits from someone else's Tianyuan hair growth liquid. Anything not in line with American interests will be labeled with various crimes. Amidst the chaos, the United States swiftly established a department known as the Mexican Anti-Terrorism Bureau, drawing the core elite from the military, mainly comprising cooperation between the CIA and the military. The day after this department was established, it loudly announced it would dispatch special forces into Mexico to work with the Mexican officials in combating terrorist organizations and preventing the spread of terrorism in Mexico. Anyone with clear sight could tell who the Mexican Anti-Terrorism Bureau was targeting. Oh, Mexico, Telu City. Seeing the news on TV, Su Jie sighed and said, disappointed, "That's it? They didn't directly deploy troops." Sitting on the other side, Carter, puzzled, asked, "Mr. Su, if the United States deployed troops, wouldn't that be a big problem for us? We simply can't contend with those fully armed soldiers." In Carter's mind, even if his Tijuana group was capable in combat, they were nothing more than a target for an American infantry regiment's few charges. The two sides' fighting power was completely unequal. Even with the armored units provided by Mr. Su, the United States possessed aircraft, missiles, and satellites, which made the Tijuana group even more disadvantaged. You don't understand. If they send troops, that's when we have room to operate. Su Jie shook his head. If the United States directly sent troops, then Su Jie would fully liberalize Tianyuan hair growth liquid, forsaking some profits to involve numerous gangs in this benefit chain. Then, the United States would not only have to deal with the Tijuana Group, but with the entire smuggling industry chain of Tianyuan hair growth liquid, reminiscent of the Opium Wars Mexico fought in the past. The fundamental reason the opium ban was hard to enforce in Mexico was economic interests. Through unreasonable demands, the United States had reduced Mexico to its own factory and a dumping ground for its products. The farmers here grow crops, but due to the agricultural dumping from the United States, their produce sells for half the price of Mexican farmers' products, making it impossible to sell without incurring losses. Since they can't sell their crops, farmers have switched to cultivating more profitable opium and cannabis, so banning opium is simply not feasible, as when one group is exterminated, another rises. When they can't even solve the problem of feeding themselves, how can they talk about banning opium? And if the United States really sends troops to Mexico, Tianyuan hair growth liquid will become another iteration of the Opium Wars. The profits from smuggling Tianyuan hair growth liquid are even higher than those from selling opium. Those gang organizations would go crazy for it. Plus, with the American military's customary mode of operation and the harm it causes to civilians during war, anti-American sentiment among Mexicans is sure to surge, which would drag the United States into a quagmire of security warfare. A prospect Su Jie, as a transcendent, would delight in, as it would play to his advantage. Su Jie, there's been a stir in Chan country. Just then, Lu Yingying walked in, holding a document in her hand, and reported, "Our spies in East Chin State have discovered that the three warlords led by Guominding have been frequently mobilizing their troops recently, seemingly planning something big." "Oh, changing the target of their attack, are they?" Su Jie immediately understood what was going on. Clearly, the CIA had some capable people on their side, well aware that eliminating one Tijuana organization is not a cure-all. As long as there's great profit to be offered, Su Jie could support even more forces to smuggle Tianyuan hair growth liquid at any time. However, the situation in Chan country's Mande region is different. This is Su Jie's stronghold, and targeting it would be a radical solution. How is the training of Jekka Security's troops going? They are basically ready and can be mobilized at any time. Lu Yingying spoke up. The 15,000 soldiers of Jekka Security were the backbone of the Mande region. Although the heavy combined arms battalion was still green in training, those warlords weren't exactly formidable forces, so they were sufficiently prepared for battle. Su Jie nodded without hesitation and said, "Then prepare for battle. It's time for us to expand." "Mr. Su, are you departing?" Carter was somewhat anxious. Mexico's newly established anti-terrorism bureau was just getting started, and Su Jie, their pillar, was about to leave, making him genuinely fearful of a strike from the United States. Remember to break the Tijuana Group into pieces, root them among the masses, benefit the general populace, and get them involved in our Tianyuan hair growth liquid business, just like in the slums of Emo City's Jimacan. Leave smuggling to the vast poor, let them participate in production, and let them act as our informants. By that stage, the United States will be powerless against us. Su Jie pulled out a map, which was filled with a dense network of underground tunnels. If the United States sends special forces to strike us, you need to take refuge in these underground tunnels and set multiple traps. Retreat when the enemy advances, harass when they halt, strike when they tire, and pursue when they retreat. We have plenty of money and the advantage of terrain and people. We can just keep wearing them down. Besides, smuggling should not be confined to the United States alone. We can expand our business to European and American countries, drawing in more people to join our smuggling ventures. In the end, Su Jie gave his instructions. His purpose for coming to Mexico had been fully accomplished. He had established a comprehensive smuggling chain for Tianyuan hair growth liquid, securing a continuous stream of profits. Now that war was about to break out in the Chan country region, Su Jie needed to return there to oversee things, planning to let Mexico run its course for the time being. If Carter were to really be captured or arrested, that would be due to his lack of capabilities, and it would warrant someone else taking his place. After all, the channels for Tianyuan hair growth liquid were in his hands. As long as there was profit to be made, no matter how much the Tijuana Group suffered, Su Jie could always support more forces to act as his smuggling proxies, without worrying that the smuggling business would be affected. Tianyuan World, Ghost Ridge Palace. Su Jie had arrived at the alchemy hall of Ghost Ridge Palace, a place where the palace's pill masters were nurtured. The elixirs produced here differed from those in the outer world, often peculiar and sinister in nature.
Brotersu. Brotersu.
The disciple guarding the alchemy hall was startled upon seeing Su Jie. After killing Du Xiaochong, Su Jie had become quite famous within Ghost Ridge Palace, hailed as one of the strongest among the disciples of the Yunling realm. I'm here to buy some items. Do you still have any blood slaughter pills for sale? Su Jie didn't beat around the bush and directly stated his purpose. The blood slaughter pill was a common elixir, easy to produce. Its primary function was for ordinary people, extracting the body's potential and enhancing various bodily functions in a short period. It also had side effects. Taking the blood slaughter pill caused severe blood deficiency in the body. If no blood transfusion was administered afterward, it would consume the person's lifespan. In Ghost Ridge Palace, the production of blood slaughter pills was cheap, requiring only some common spirit plants mixed with a small amount of blood marrow crystal. In the past, blood slaughter pills were used on human slaves working in mines and herb fields of Ghost Ridge Palace. These human slaves were often forced to consume the pills to increase their work intensity and efficiency. Under the influence of high-intensity labor and the aftereffects of the blood slaughter pill, those human slaves typically had less than a year to live. Since they were bound to be used by demon cultivators to feed insects at the brink of death, treated as consumables, their lives were of no concern. Naturally, there was no need for blood transfusions or anything of the sort. Blood slaughter pills. Yes, Brother Su. How many would you like? The disciple quickly spoke, mentioning that with the righteous sects surrounding Ghost Ridge Palace, some of the mines and herb fields had ceased operations, leaving a large quantity of blood slaughter pills in storage. Start me off with 200,000 pills. And if that's not enough, I'll buy more. Su Jie stated a number that left the disciple astonished. So many. Although blood slaughter pills were inexpensive, buying so many at once would still cost thousands of blood marrow crystals. Don't have any?
Vedo.
If it were someone else, selling so many blood slaughter pills at once would require reporting to the elder for permission, but with Su Jie as the buyer, there were no such complications. The disciple quickly left to prepare the blood slaughter pills. 3 days later, Chan Country, Mande Region Military Camp. Su Jie, clad in military uniform, appeared on the high platform of the parade ground. Below, tens of thousands of Jekka security soldiers formed a massive battalion, holding steel rifles, standing ramrod straight. Nearby, neatly parked tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery were all fully armed. The densely packed soldiers gathered here, creating a sea of heads that spread a solemn atmosphere throughout the area. From the sidelines, journalists with cameras were loyally recording everything, broadcasting it to television stations. In the Mande region, every household was glued to the TV, watching a scene that would go down in the history of the Mande region. The spring breeze fluttered as Su Jie surveyed his surroundings, receiving fervent gazes from the Jekka security soldiers, everyone aware of what was about to happen. Prior continuous military drills had already sent whispers through the winds of an impending action against other warlords of East Qin State. My soldiers, I am the founder of Jekka Company, Su Jie. Most of you should recognize me, so I won't bother introducing myself much. Su Jie stood straight, his resonant and sonorous voice reaching all around. Today is April 18th, an ordinary day, yet at this moment, the warlords of East Qin State are already stirring. Yesterday, Guomindang's troops breached Haiyan Mountain, crossing the alert lines in the Mande region. Yesterday, Ong Yuluan's forces initiated a military drill in Chiwu, deploying planes and artillery. Yesterday, Suamin Tun personally made a speech, accusing our Mande region of human rights abuses, enslaving the people through an economy reliant on insects. Yesterday, some so-called renowned international media slandered Jekka Company for engaging in illegal businesses, manufacturing raw materials for Tianyuan hair growth liquid, thereby poisoning people worldwide. Yesterday, someone suddenly contacted me. If we do not hand over the formula for Tianyuan hair growth liquid, they threaten to shut down Jekka Company. This morning, a new batch of arms was delivered via sea to a region controlled by the warlords. Where did these arms come from? Naturally, they came from the support of foreign powers. Why are they targeting us everywhere? Because we in the Mande region are not in line with them, because we have lived better lives, and our lives have undergone radical changes. Because we possess the Tianyuan hair growth liquid, a product that sells well worldwide, which naturally these foreign powers do not want to see. They only allow us to live in poverty and hardship forever, doing the most menial jobs, being part of the global industrial chain with the least profit, subjected to their enslavement and scorn, and they will never allow us to challenge their authority, live the life they enjoy, or obtain high profit margins in the industrial chain. We crave peace, but the hyenas and tigers will show their fangs, saying, "You do not deserve to sit at the same table and share a meal with us. The dog bowl is where you belong." Those noble capitalists will say, "You only deserve the scraps we leave behind." Those foreign powers wanting our submission only wish to see us wag our tails at them, hoping they throw us an extra bone or two. Do you say we should submit? The voice traveled through the microphone throughout the venue, each soldier gripping their steel guns, responding with deafening roars. Never, never, never. Dust flew and thunderous voices echoed, the resolute iron-blooded sound declaring their choice. Before the TV, citizens of the Mande region also rose, shouting angrily, "Damn it, we've finally started to live well. Whoever dares to touch Jekka Company, I will kill them." Before Jekka Company came, my monthly salary was only 300 or 400 Hua Yuan. After Jekka Company arrived, my salary is now 1,500 Hua Yuan. Who is good and who is bad? Don't we, the wage earners, know? Down with those who want to oppress us. Grandpa, where's that old gun you hid? Give it to me. I also want to join Jekka Security to fight the enemies. A torrent of voices arose, and the whole Mande region boiled over. Su Jie was very satisfied with everyone's response. The morale of the troops was usable. I heard everyone's response. But words are the weakest weapons. Bullets and corpses will show them our determination. I of course know what war means. The enemy has support from foreign powers, equipped with the most advanced weapons. It will be a tremendously harsh test, a prolonged struggle filled with suffering. As I have said before, all we can offer is our blood, sweat, tears, and toil. But are we afraid? We will fight those overconfident warlords on land, sea, and air. With bullets and iron blood, we will tell them that for victory, for a hard-earned life, we will spare no expense, fear no terror, no matter how long or arduous the road ahead. We will seize this victory because without victory, we cannot survive. Now, as the highest commander of Jekka Security, I order you to launch a cleansing war against the 3 warlords Guo Mining, Ong Yuluan, and Soamin Tun for the safety of the Mande region. War! 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 In a roar that shook the heavens, rows of armored vehicles started, and armed helicopters whirred overhead. Massive columns of soldiers, marching along the newly paved asphalt road, headed toward the border areas adjoining the 3 warlords. Since the enemy wants war, then I will give them war. Su Jie gazed into the distance with a profound look, as if seeing a pair of invisible giant hands named Capital maneuvering everything. Behind him, Lu Yingying looked up in admiration, her heart pounding, her gaze at Su Jie somewhat infatuated. Situang moved extremely agilely, with a strength and speed far surpassing those of the past, coupled with enhanced neurological reactions, which made him as comfortable as a fish in water on the complex and ever-changing jungle battlefield. After executing several soldiers with his bayonet, his figure was finally spotted by a large group of soldiers, and the warlord soldiers furiously shot at his area. Situang was not in a hurry. He had already opened a breakthrough, and a significant area showed an obvious vacuum of firepower. Behind him, Jekka security soldiers, informed by the intercom about the gap in firepower, immediately rushed to seize the fire points. On the entire battlefield, there were dozens of soldiers like Situang who had ingested strengthening pills. stimulated by the strengthening pills. Each one transformed into a relentless killing machine, embodying the might of Lamborghini gods of war. Incredibly enhanced stamina, speed, strength, and neurological reactions. They occasionally felt little pain even when injured, paired with precise shooting skills, which were even more exaggerated than being fully pumped with adrenaline. In less than half an hour, the warlord soldiers, who originally had the high ground and the advantages of terrain and numbers, had been crushed. These warlord soldiers horrifyingly discovered that the enemy army contained supermen. These supermen had exceptionally accurate shooting and extremely robust physiques, darting around the battlefield like wildcats, unbeknownst to many soldiers who fell to these supermen's gunfire. Being far from elite themselves, they were immediately petrified by the massacre of the super soldiers. Unsure who surrendered first, but on the entire battlefield, warlord soldiers began to emerge from their covers one after another, raising their guns, unwilling to endure the threats of the super soldiers anymore. 2 hours later, after the effects of the strengthening pill had worn off, Situong felt very unwell. If previously he felt as if he had endless strength, he now felt like he had used a hand pump a dozen times, resulting in devastating weakness and debility hard to sustain. Situong, come for a blood transfusion. Just then, the battalion commander called out his name. A modified logistics support vehicle drove over, around which gathered many soldiers just like Situong, who had ingested strengthening pills, and battlefield paramedics were performing blood transfusions on each one. What's your name? Situong. Let me check. Situong. Blood type B. The paramedic expertly hung the blood bag and inserted the needle into the vein to administer a blood transfusion to Situong. As the continuous flow of blood entered his body, Situong immediately felt his body change. Like drought-stricken land blessed with timely rain, his bodily fatigue gradually decreased, moving towards a normal state. Brother, how many did you kill? The super soldier next to him, also receiving a blood transfusion, greeted and inquired. Didn't count exactly, probably around 30 or so. Situong mentioned a number that even he found surprising. Even though he had indeed excelled in military exercises and became a super soldier of Jekka security, issued with strengthening pills, achieving such records still seemed incredible to him. In the past, it was not unheard of for soldiers to achieve such records. Some soldiers were naturally born kings of soldiers, with records of killing over 100 people in one battle, but those were achieved after fighting for several hours or even a day. In contrast, Situong's entire battle lasted less than half an hour. If it had continued, who knows how many more he could have killed. Are you a first-class super soldier? I'm third class, only killed 12 people. How do you train? The super soldier who was asking questions spoke with evident envy. At Jekka Security, based on the screening and compatibility with the strengthening pill, super soldiers were divided into 3 levels: third class, second class, and first class. First-class super soldiers like him could maximize the medicinal effects of the strengthening pill, gaining more enhancements than others. They possessed strength comparable to tigers or leopards and could easily break the human speed limit for 100 meters. Also, the effects lasted much longer. I'm not sure. I'm not first class. I'm a second-class super soldier. My training just includes some additional subjects. Situong was not very talkative, typically responding only when asked. By this time, the captured warlord soldiers had been counted and, looking downcast, were being escorted out by Jekka security. As they passed by the logistical support vehicles, these warlord soldiers tread lightly, some with faces pale from fright. Yet, these super soldiers were covered in blood, their eyes filled with a murderous aura. It was these battlefield super soldiers who had annihilated many of their comrades, fighting like transformed persons, forcing them into retreat, which was the primary cause of their defeat. Form ranks, we continue moving. The captives will be handed over on the spot to the rear, as we must reach Hunyai City by tonight. The battalion commander continued to speak as the Jekka security soldiers prepared to move forward, striding powerfully over mountains and ridges, heading towards Hunyai City, the most important city within Ong Yuluan warlords' territory. Almost irresistibly, Jekka security split into 2 groups, carrying out a 2-pronged attack. The territories defended by Ong Yuluan and Suamin Tun kept losing high-risk areas. In front of the super soldiers who had taken the strengthening pill, these warlord soldiers were no match, with about 1/10 dying or wounded before the rest would collapse and surrender. Often, the defense lines manned by thousands would rely on the dense forests for resistance, yet they would be riddled with holes under the breakthroughs of the super soldiers. Even later, upon hearing about the existence of super soldiers within Jekka security, these warlord soldiers would flee at the slightest wind, abandoning their positions completely. Hunai City. This was the most important city in the territory of the Ong Yuluan warlords, with a population of 500,000. Facing the fierce attack by Jekka security in the dense forests, Ong Yuluan had no choice but to recall all his soldiers to defend Hunai City, hoping to delay time through street fighting and wait for reinforcements. At night, the 2nd and 4th Regiments of Jekka Security's Mountain Brigade assembled here. The 2 light infantry mountain regiments had a total of 4,000 people and had not suffered much loss on the way. After a brief rest, the battle kicked off the next day. Situong, as a super soldier, would lead the way with other super soldiers, acting as the spearhead. That is, Situong saw several super soldiers different from himself. Their shoulders bore an Arabic number 1 with a centipede wrapped around on both sides, and they looked even more ferocious, causing even Situong some alarm. Situong knew these men were first-class super soldiers, under regiment-level control, not available to basic battalion-level and company-level units. Do we have the confidence to take down the battle in 3 hours? Commander, leave it to us. The dozen or so first-class super soldiers appeared calm without the pre-battle jitters. Good. I'll be waiting for your good news. Get them outfitted. Soon, a few armored transport vehicles drove over. Under the watchful eyes of Jekka security soldiers, the armored transport vehicles opened and the logistics soldiers laboriously moved out several heavy armor suits. The heavy steel castings were not only thick but also made from high-strength steel, making them astonishingly heavy. Yet the first-class super soldiers didn't care. At this moment, each of them swallowed 8 to 12 strengthening pills. They bent down and pulled on those steel components one by one, completely sealing their bodies. They resembled medieval heavy armor knights, true canisters of iron, and also looked like single soldier mechas from science fiction stories, which were quite intimidating. Click-clack. Over a dozen first-class super soldiers moved their bodies. These steel components had no trace of technology and weren't the so-called mechas, being entirely powered by human strength. Ordinary people couldn't even take a step if they wore them, much less fight. But when these first-class super soldiers geared up, they turned them into the most formidable heavy armor, operated by their sheer brute force. The logistic soldiers hustled about, bringing Gatling machine guns and large-caliber anti-aircraft machine guns to these iron cans. These weapons, mainly used on vehicles or as helicopter aviation guns, were finally equipped with heavy ammunition boxes. Once the faceplates were sealed, one by one, these human-formed steel monsters were complete. Move out. At a command, these steel soldiers boarded armored personnel carriers and sped towards Hunai City. A large contingent of soldiers followed behind, surging into the inner city of Hunai with formidable momentum. In the sky, drones ascended one after another, beginning their reconnaissance and search for the enemy. On the ground, the barely arrived reinforcements from the heavy synthetic brigade, a dozen tanks and armored vehicles, also raced to the streets. As for the more substantial firepower, they were trapped on the mountainous muddy roads, either breaking down or being unable to move forward or backward, without the chance to make it to the battlefield. The war immediately erupted after Jekka security entered the city. The warlord soldiers relied on the city, constantly shooting from windowsills, door cracks, and sandbag bunkers. Some carried rocket launchers, others set up heavy machine gun positions, and some called for artillery bombardment. Situong fired his rifle, blowing the head off an enemy who had just appeared, but more gunfire poured in, preventing him from going out. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the sky as a warlord's armed helicopter flew in low, slowly aiming at Situang's hiding spot. Situang's face dramatically changed. Even though he had taken strengthening pills, his body was still flesh and blood, and covering fire from machine guns and rocket launchers would still tear him apart. At this critical moment, A series of muffled shots rang out. A line of fire appeared in the sky. Relentless bullets continuously struck the armed helicopter. Turning his head, Situong saw a first-class super soldier appear on the street, crazily firing a 14.5mm large-caliber anti-aircraft machine gun like a heavy-duty concrete drill, shooting out armor-piercing incendiary bullets. This type of ammunition, specifically for striking aircraft and light armored targets, was a narrowed version of the 23mm autocannon rounds, with tens of thousands of joules of energy upon exit, repeatedly exploding on the armed helicopter. The first-class super soldier first adjusted his trajectory using tracers, quickly damaging the helicopter's optoelectronic pod and thermal imaging among other target-searching equipment. The armed helicopter in the sky continually climbed and accelerated, attempting to escape at speeds of hundreds of kilometers per hour and get away from the attack site. In theory, the cumbersome anti-aircraft machine gun would have a hard time keeping up with the agile and maneuverable armed helicopter, unless multiple anti-aircraft guns locked the area with their combined firepower. But this first-class super soldier was obviously different, enduring the powerful recoil of the anti-aircraft gun. His enhanced body quickly ran to the rooftop, continuously firing at the armed helicopter. With precise marksmanship and neurological reaction, his bullets chased the armed helicopter, targeting the rotor linkage and the engine compartment. The armed helicopter began to smoke and eventually lost control, spiraling down and crashing heavily to the ground, turning into a pile of scrap metal. Miao Luan looked around. The hail of gunfire from the warlord soldiers pinged and bounced off the heavy armor steel mecha, but couldn't truly penetrate it to injure the enclosed Miao Luan. It was only because his mecha suit was too heavily armored that only violent explosions and continuous firing from 12.7mm caliber machine guns with armor-piercing incendiary bullets, or an anti-material heavy sniper rifle could genuinely penetrate the suit. Facing a barrage of bullet attacks akin to a splash of water, Miao Luan paid them no heed, moving constantly along the rooftops of buildings scattered throughout the city, leaping from one to another. Despite wearing the heavy mecha, he still moved with remarkable speed. It was only the weight he had to be concerned about, for if the roof quality was lacking, he would crash through it entirely. 200 meters to the left, 9 o'clock direction, third-level residential building, 5 to 8 enemy soldiers. 520 meters ahead, a tank is on the move, be cautious and seek cover. An infantry fighting vehicle is heading your way, 7 o'clock direction, 300 meters away. The earpiece continuously transmitted the voice of the commander, with 3 drones circling nearby in the sky, searching and serving as eyes and providing a broad view. They offered intelligence for Miao Luan, a first-class super soldier, providing better means to cope with heavy firepower threats and to survive on the battlefield. Confronting those enemy soldiers sneaking attacks from within the civil buildings, Miao Luan gripped an anti-aircraft machine gun, aimed unapologetically at a house, and mercilessly pulled the trigger. The warlord soldiers hiding behind the brick and concrete screamed as 14.5mm caliber bullets easily penetrated the walls and shattered the bodies inside into several parts. Boom! A shell came hurtling in, and a heavy main battle tank slowly appeared on the street, trying to aim its gun barrel at Miao Luan. Miao Luan's ears twitched slightly. Besides the information provided by the drone commander, he also caught the loud noises and engine sounds of the tank's movement himself. Super soldiers like him received enhancements not just in strength and speed, but also improvements in hearing, vision, and smell. Perceiving danger, Miao Luan immediately ducked into a blind spot in a back alley at the end of the street. The tank's launched high-explosive bomb blew up a 2-story residential building and caused Miao Luan to stagger from the blast wave. But it did not truly harm him. Running to another street, Miao Luan didn't confront the tank head-on, as single-soldier anti-tank missiles and rocket launchers would deal with that. What Miao Luan needed to do was utilize his defensive capabilities, especially against those infantry with lighter weapons. The warlord soldiers defending this area on the new street looked up to see a steel monster charging towards them head-on. The terrified warlord soldiers pulled their triggers in panic, but the bullets couldn't breach the defense, and in the next moment, Miao Luan, like a tiger among sheep, swept a few of them into a bloody mess with his machine gun. One soldier directly in front was knocked flying, his ribcage shattered upon landing, and he was rapidly running out of breath. Miao Luan's left fist lashed out, striking a warlord soldier's head. Having consumed 12 strengthening pills, his powerful physique allowed him to punch the man to death with one blow, even scattering his brain matter. Bang bang! Several grenades landed at his feet, but Miao Luan didn't even glance down, unafraid of such a weapon that primarily relied on shrapnel, instead turning his attention to the warlord soldiers shouldering rocket launchers. Amidst the grenade explosions, Miao Luan hoisted the high-caliber anti-aircraft machine gun, and, under the terrified gaze of the opposing warlord soldiers, he pulled the trigger. The large bullets swept out, and those attempting to shoot at Miao Luan with heavy machine guns and rocket launchers were the first to fall into a pool of blood. Screech! A six-wheeled armored vehicle entered the street, and as Miao Luan and the driver locked eyes, he, having already picked up on the sound of the vehicle's movement, had his gun ready in advance. The next moment, relying on his neurological reaction speed, Miao Luan fired first, the long chain of ammunition quivering continuously. The armored vehicle, equipped only to defend against 12.7mm bullets, was easily pierced by 14.5mm caliber bullets. The soldiers inside, needless to say, were already thoroughly dead, their armored vehicle becoming their iron coffin. If they had fired first with the power of their mounted machine gun, it would have been Miao Luan turned to slag. Having completed this ordeal, Miao Luan continued on to the next battlefield. With the deployment of super soldiers, the territory of Hunyai City was being gradually consumed. The lethality brought by the super soldiers was one thing, but more importantly, the presence of these super soldiers greatly defeated the morale of the warlord soldiers. Especially with the engagement of first-class super soldiers, the warlord soldiers were filled with fear. Their 7.62 caliber rifles could not penetrate the defenses at all. It was like facing an indestructible monster. When armed helicopters and tanks with heavy firepower were deployed, those steel monsters would skillfully escape, taking advantage of the complex urban environment to dodge. Moreover, with the intelligence provided by drones from the sky, the attack was utterly elusive, specifically bullying those light infantry and making the warlord soldiers cry for their parents. If it were in the plains, these first-class super soldiers would just be slightly tougher live targets. Various high-powered weapons could be fully leveraged, and no amount of armor would help. But in the city, heavy weaponry was difficult to utilize. The best method to handle first-class super soldiers was to conduct large-scale comprehensive bombing. Several first-class super soldiers were bombarded to death by artillery, even blasted into pieces by tanks. Yet, the military achievements they brought were astounding. They transformed into the spearheads of 2 mountain brigades, pioneers clearing the path, stabbing directly into the crucial parts of Hunyai City like sharp swords, significantly hindering the defense lines of the garrison forces and forcing the warlord soldiers to gather heavy firepower for suppression. Due to the disarray in the defense lines caused by the first-class super soldiers, the front battlefields were left exposed, allowing the other Jekka security soldiers to proceed with the occupation methodically, sparing many dangers and sacrifices. In the brutal combat facing the dominance of Jekka security, especially the massacre conducted by those super soldiers, many warlord soldiers, while fighting, snapped the tense string in their minds. These remaining forces in Hunyai City were the elite troops of the warlords, and at this point they began to surrender en masse. Eventually, above a government building in the city center, the flag of Jekka Company was raised high. The entire battle for Hunyai City, from start to finish, only took 2 hours. Nothing like those lengthy and bloody urban sieges that could last for 10 days, half a month, or even months. In Hunyai City, Miao Luan, with the help of logistics soldiers, took off his battle armor. He seemed utterly exhausted, gasping heavily as if he were a bellows. The surrounding Jekka security soldiers cast admiring glances at him. They had witnessed the combat of these first-class super soldiers, and calling them little supermen wouldn't be an exaggeration. Without these super soldiers, capturing Hunyai City easily would have been unthinkable. It could have turned into a tug of war, with the entire city turning into a meat grinder, both sides incessantly pouring infantry into the city, which is the most common outcome of city siege battles. The logistics support vehicle rushed over, and a medic started transfusing blood into Miao Luan, sustaining the lives of these powerful soldiers. Each first-class super soldier was a precious asset to Jekka Security. Out of 15,000 personnel in Jekka Security, only a mere few dozen could perfectly adapt to the strengthening pill and needed immediate medical attention. "What's your name?" Miao Luan looked at Situang, who was also receiving a blood transfusion next to him. During the battle, he had noticed Situang, who was evidently a super soldier as well. "Situang, from the 2nd Brigade, 3rd Battalion." Situang scratched his head and curiously scrutinized Miao Luan, asking, "We both take strengthening pills, but why are your changes so drastic? Does eating a few more really make such a difference?" Miao Luan cracked a slight smile and explained, "Besides taking strengthening pills, a few days ago, Jekka Security also performed a round of enhancement modifications on us. At the Fumin breeding farm, Chief Su personally conducted surgery on us. It seemed like he implanted something into my body. I can't quite specify what it was, but afterward, our bodies became exceptionally strong." Miao Luan was unaware that in the Tianyuan world, there existed something called a symbiotic poisonous insect. A symbiotic poisonous insect called silver scale worm had been implanted in his body. This type of insect required the host's fresh blood for sustenance and greatly stimulated the host's physical abilities during combat, endowing the host with a powerful physique in return. If the host died, the symbiotic poisonous insect would also perish simultaneously. Similarly, if the symbiotic poisonous insect died, the host would die as well. However, because the enhancement effect of the poisonous insect was limited, cultivators didn't value it highly and considered it an additional vulnerability. For a Gu master, finding an insect hidden inside a human body was simple, and if the symbiotic poisonous insect was targeted, it really was the end for the host. "Is that so?" Situang felt envious. Unfortunately, his body wasn't perfectly compatible with the strengthening pill to advance to a first-class super war and undergo the body enhancement modification. "Let's focus on fighting for now. Drive those scrappy warlords out, and once Jekka Company grows stronger, more and more soldiers will surely receive enhancement modifications." Miao Luan comforted him this way. He had come from a poor family, and Jekka Company had changed his family's life. Thus, upon hearing the news of the war, he wasn't scared but rather, he was boiling with excitement to serve the Jekka Company. "I will do my best to kill the enemy." With a naive smile, Situang engaged warmly in the conversation about Jekka Company. Both firmly supported the cleansing war. As Hunai City on the Eastern Front fell, the most capable troops of the Ong Yuluan warlords surrendered, and the remaining forces could no longer withstand Jekka Security's assault. The warlord soldiers started surrendering to Jekka Security one after another. On the Western Front, the territory of the Suamin Tun warlords was similarly pushed back by Jekka Security. To avoid having his city destroyed, Suamin Tun intentionally shifted the battle lines into the forest, causing both sides' soldiers to engage in jungle warfare in the densely forested and mountainous rainforest. However, he was unaware that this primitive jungle environment was naturally a battlefield for super soldiers. Under conditions of poor visibility, plentiful cover, and complex terrain, group after group of super soldiers leading the charge shattered Suamin Tun's forces in just a few rounds, causing many to surrender to Jekka Security. When the Mountain Brigade later stationed in the core city under Suamin Tun's control, only some hastily assembled militia were present, with hardly any regular army troops. As Jekka Security prepared to attack the city, the troops inside promptly ran out to wave the white flag and surrendered, capturing the city without shedding blood. After the first phase of the battle, Jekka Security had seized all territories from both the Suamin Tun and Ong Yuluan warlords. Over 10,000 warlord soldiers were mostly captured, extending Jekka Company's territory by 32,000 square kilometers. The entire first phase of the war lasted just a mere week. Due to unforeseen heavy rain, the Heavy Composite Brigade in Jekka Security's rear faced major issues with the old mud roads deteriorating severely. The tanks, armored vehicles, and self-propelled artillery were still struggling to move, while the Mountain Brigade had already ended the battle. But even in such conditions, relying on the powerful super soldiers to break through the defensive lines, Jekka Security's Mountain Brigade executed a blitzkrieg typically performed by armored floods, annihilating nearly 10,000 soldiers from the two mercenary warlords in one fell swoop. On the international front, after another fierce exchange of fire in Chan country, there was significant reaction in public opinion. Since Chan country often had internal conflicts, sometimes with warlords clashing among themselves and sometimes with the warlords fighting the government army, it was difficult to make big news. But this war initiated by the Mande region was different. Soldiers who were clearly of superior standard appeared on the battlefield. Especially the appearance of first-class super soldiers, captured and uploaded to the internet by the soldiers from the warlord side, attracted quite a crowd online. Oh my God! Is that a mecha? Are there already single soldier mechas? Which country is so advanced? Looks fake at first glance. Must be a movie trailer, right? Rather than employ such marketing gimmicks, they should focus on making good movies with convincing quality. 7.62 caliber bullets can't even pierce through. A human wearing this kind of heavy armor mecha can barely move. What's the difference from a metal coffin? Current human technology can't provide the power for such all-covering single-soldier mechas. What place is Chan country? They can't even produce their own artillery or aircraft. How could they have such advanced single-soldier mechas? Only fools would believe that. Although I also know it's fake, these mecha warriors do look really cool. The portrayal of the battlefield is so bloody and realistic. I look forward to the release of this movie. I will definitely go to support it at the cinema. Doesn't seem right, I don't see any traces of editing in the video. It seems like actual footage. Could those mechas be real? While the internet was abuzz, the vast majority of people did not believe in the existence of such single-soldier mechas. However, in the command center of Guomindang's warlord camp in East Chin State, his expression was extremely solemn, because he knew that the batch of super soldiers, including those terrifying soldiers clad in heavy armor, truly existed. At this moment, sitting beside him were Ong Yuluan and Suamin Tun, the best evidence of their existence. These two warlords, whose territories were completely annexed and occupied by Jekka Company, had come to his territory seeking refuge via helicopter when the battle turned against them. They had no determination to fight the enemy to the last moment. General, Jekka security soldiers are currently active around Puling Mountain and Old Fortress Pass. They could launch a two-pronged attack on our forces at any moment. The Chief of Staff reported the adverse battle situation to Guomindang. Looking at the map. You can't hold on even for a week. What kind of soldiers are you training? Guomindang's expression darkened as he vented his anger on Ong Yuluan and Suamin Tun. Humph, when I asked you to send reinforcements, you dallied and took ages. No wonder we lost, it's all your fault. Ong Yuluan slammed the table, spitting as he spoke to Guomindang. Having lost the grounds vital for their survival, he believed the fault lay entirely with Guomindang. Guomindang had 18,000 soldiers. If he had been willing to send troops to their aid, they wouldn't have failed. You haven't encountered those super soldiers. If you had, your soldiers wouldn't have performed much better than ours. Suamin Tun was also filled with grievance. In his view, his soldiers were definitely tough, often engaging in guerrilla warfare with the government army in the woods and repelling many government encirclements. That's why he was confident enough to deploy his forces into the deep forests to confront Jekka security, instead of positioning them in the cities. As one might expect, his confidence was shattered into pieces in front of the super soldiers. Realizing the terror of the super soldiers was by then too late to recall his troops. He sent soldiers to conduct guerrilla warfare in the forest, but they went like meat buns thrown to dogs, gone without a return. They were either killed or surrendered, suffering a miserable defeat. Humph, I have nearly 20,000 soldiers, plus aircraft, tanks, and artillery. How could I be like you? Guomindang sneered coldly. He was about to say something else when a call from the military intelligence suddenly rang. The staff officer immediately went to answer it, but his expression grew increasingly grim. General, Jekka Security has launched an attack on us. They've divided their forces into two groups. One is approaching from Qigong Mountain, having breached several of our outposts, and captured Hongshang City within an hour. The other advanced from Minshui River and was engaged in a fierce battle at Yipo City 2 hours ago. Now, I fear Yipo City is likely in grave danger. The staff officer, having studied at military academies in Europe and America, spoke these words not to alarm but to attest to the power of JECA security. Where are our armored units, our aircraft? Why haven't they taken action against them? Guomindang looked incredulous, questioning whether the elite troops he had trained were really so easily defeated. Before the invasion by JECA security, our Hoshuan Air Force Base and Zalimping Air Force Base were infiltrated by armed personnel. Those were super soldiers from JECA security. More than a dozen military aircraft, purchased from overseas, were destroyed, and several hired pilots were also shot dead. As for the armored units, now in the spring rainy season, the roads are mired in mud. Many of our armored units are stuck in the muddy terrain, lacking sufficient logistical support with maintenance troops and engineering vehicles, making it difficult for our armored units to be present on the battlefield. The staff officer's tone became increasingly despondent as he spoke, indicating the disadvantageous position they were in. Although Guomindang's army had received substantial military support from abroad, they were previously only light infantry. To efficiently operate armored units required more than just theoretical data on paper. Comprehensive logistics were essential for these units to be effective in combat. General, Mr. Lawrence has arrived. A soldier entered the command center with the message, bringing a moment of jubilation to Guomindang, who was worried about how to counter JECA Security's invasion. This Lawrence was a representative sent by Aster Pharmaceutical, and the arms he brought were procured by this pharmaceutical company contacting arms dealers. Soon, the door opened, and two Caucasians entered. To Guomindang's surprise, the formerly haughty Mr. Lawrence was now standing behind the other Caucasian man, seemingly indicating that the other man was the real authority. Mr. Lawrence, this is a senior special agent with the CIA. You can call me Moritz. After Moritz disclosed his identity, everyone present was shocked, and it became clear why Mr. Lawrence was so humble. Guomindang immediately became excited and asked, "The CIA? Is the United States going to intervene in this war?" Moritz smiled and said, "JECA Company has committed many evils, and we in the United States have decided to eradicate this tumor in Chan country. However, we will not declare war openly, but will instead send a covert force to support you. We have also contacted the Chan country government army, and they too will deploy troops to combat JECA Company, breaking this Chinese warlord's rule over the Mande region." Guomindang and the other warlords were overjoyed at the involvement of the United States, putting an end to any suspense over the outcome of the war. No matter how formidable the super soldiers from JECA Security were, how could mere flesh and blood withstand aircraft missiles? Without any hesitation, Guomindang announced his agreement to the CIA's assistance. Even though the CIA offered a stringent agreement demanding various concessions after the war, he signed his name without hesitation. After all, he could be defeated by JECA Security at any moment. Once his life was gone, worrying about territory and money would be pointless. Recently, at the invitation of the Chan country, our United States Navy is preparing to dispatch an amphibious assault task force to hold joint military exercises with Chan country in parts of the Bay of Bengal's sea domain and on land. The aim is to hone the interoperability of multi-brigade troop types in transoceanic warfare, to fully strengthen naval cooperation with Chan country, and to jointly address global threats, ensuring the safety of civilian shipping in the Asia-Pacific region. The exercise begins on April 28th, and the specific end date is to be determined. On April 25th, just as JECA Security had fully taken control of the territories of two warlords and was aggressively advancing toward the area where Guomindang was located, a piece of news suddenly appeared before the public eye. Many people were puzzled by the news, wondering why the United States would not conduct exercises with India but instead play around with Chan country. Chan country was so poor it clinked. All they could bring to the table were a few battered frigates. People saw little meaning in such exercises. Then, a news release by the Chan country government put things into perspective for many. Recently, within our country's Mande region, a group known as the JECA Group has wantonly stirred up violence and sparked intense conflicts, endangering innocent civilians, causing numerous casualties, and displacing many civilians. In the spirit of our responsibility to protect the lives and property of our citizens, our country has decided to dispatch troops to clamp down, to eradicate the cancer of JECA Company that has entrenched itself in the Mande region, and to restore stability and peace to the area. Almost back-to-back announcements from the United States and Chan Country, combined with the recent outbreak of warlord conflicts in the East Chin state, led many to put two and two together. It was mostly believed that the United States, ever the meddler, couldn't stand being alone and had to mess around wherever there was a conflict. Several neighboring countries voiced their protests, but the United States didn't care at all and continued in its own way, hastily assembling a fleet to head to the Bay of Bengal. The Lion City, United States Zhangyi Naval Base. Early this morning, 2 Freedom-class coastal combat ships slowly sailed out of the naval base. This class of coastal combat ship has a length of 127.4 meters, a beam of 13.16 meters, a draft of 3.9 meters, and a full load displacement of over 3,000 tons. They are capable of carrying helicopters and multiple missiles and possess formidable firepower, proving highly effective in coastal battles. The 2 coastal combat ships set out to sea and merged with a fleet composed of over 20 other vessels. This was a military force summoned by the United States from the Middle East, where soldiers were stationed on high-speed troop transport ships. 15 of these ships in total, each loaded with hundreds of soldiers from a battalion. In addition to that, there were specially designed roll-on/roll-off ships, tank landing ships, hospital ships, ammunition ships, and logistic support vessels, carrying a large amount of military supplies and equipment. The United States had named this force the Bay of Bengal Expeditionary Fleet, which had just been put together. On the transport ships, there were a large number of soldiers, an infantry regiment, a light armored vehicle battalion, a tank battalion equipped with M1A2 main battle tanks, an artillery battalion, a reconnaissance battalion, an engineer battalion, and a mixed squadron of short-range helicopters, with a service support group, totaling around 8,000 personnel. Within this fleet, the most eye-catching was the amphibious assault ship, displacing tens of thousands of tons. On board were several F-35 Joint Strike Fighters and various types of helicopters, as well as nearly 2,000 Marine Corps Special Task Force members. Escorting the amphibious assault ship, there were 2 Aegis destroyers on either flank. Beyond this fleet's paper strength, once the Marine Corps of the Bay of Bengal Expeditionary Fleet landed ashore, they would have satellite intelligence support, naval missile support, and the convenience of mobilizing troops from global bases. The appearance of such an expeditionary fleet in the Bay of Bengal put the neighboring countries on alert, especially those with poor relations with the United States, who were closely monitoring the movements of the fleet at all times. In the amphibious assault ship's command room, CIA Senior Special Agent Moritz was here, sitting across from a major general who was the military commander of the expeditionary fleet for this operation, David. The two were engaging in their final tactical discussion. We'll first land at the Dan Mian port controlled by the government army, then take the land route, following the Chan Country government army, joining forces and fighting our way through, to test the so-called strength of JECA security. David said gravely. He had struggled through family connections to secure the command of this Marine expeditionary fleet. If the campaign went well, it would add a significant achievement to his resume. Another star on his epaulets and a promotion with a raise were within easy reach, so David took this combat mission very seriously. I have no objections, you're the military experts, but could we at the CIA make use of the SEAL assault team? Moritz shrugged his shoulders, making a request. David adjusted his military cap, asking with surprise, "What do you plan to do with the SEAL assault team?" The SEAL assault team is under the Navy's command, managed by the United States Navy Special Command. Considering the complex mountainous environment of Chan Country, they had also brought along a team from the SEAL assault team. Our mission this time, aside from striking JECA security, is to capture a dangerous individual named Su Jie. He's the mastermind behind these challenges to the hegemony of the United States, and we need the power of the SEAL assault team to bring him back to the United States for trial. Moritz would not let go of a dangerous individual who dared challenge the hegemony of the United States. Su Jie? Did he create those super soldiers, too? David showed an interested expression. He knew that JECA Company had a group of special super soldiers, each highly agile, with exceptional marksmanship. Some were even clad in heavy armor, impervious to ordinary bullets. Moritz nodded, adding, "The White House think tank suspects that Su Jie might have extracted a special enhancing drug from insects. A thing named strengthening pill that warlord soldiers have gotten their hands on. We've already sent it back for testing. No wonder that guy started so many insect farms in the Mande region. He's not to be underestimated. If we got hold of that stuff and spread it throughout the army." The more David talked, the brighter his eyes shone. If he could get his hands on the method of making those strengthening pills, his status in the military would surely rise significantly. Those super soldiers are tough to deal with. We've learned from the warlords and satellite reconnaissance that these super soldiers have extraordinary physical abilities. No matter, we've brought enough heavy firepower this time. Flesh and blood can't withstand artillery shells, after all. That is indeed the case. Seeing David full of confidence, Moritz said no more. The fleet, at cruising speed, raced through the night, entering the Bay of Bengal and heading straight for Chan Country's sea domain. Midway, for small frigates of the Chan Country Navy, just over 1,000 tons, also came alongside, forming a fleet formation to conduct naval exercises. The exercises were serious. They symbolically towed derelict vessels out to use as targets and even invited the media to watch and take photos, so they could write articles and prevent anyone from thinking that we, the Eagles, were bullying others and causing trouble everywhere. After several days of sailing, the fleet reached the designated sea area, and from afar, they could see the coast and the docks on the horizon. This port, named Dan Mian, had excellent hydrological conditions and was deep enough for the amphibious assault ships to berth. However, the amphibious assault ships did not dock but remained adrift at sea, preparing for the upcoming air-to-ground assault. The other transports, loaded with soldiers, approached the dock slowly, intending to disembark the personnel and equipment first. Meanwhile, as the fleet was busy preparing to dock, Su Jie appeared on a hilltop in the Dan Mian military port. Because of those naval exercise press releases, it wasn't hard to deduce the fleet's destination using a map. Plus, considering that this was the only dock in the vicinity suitable for landing, Su Jie had been waiting here for quite some time. Tisk, so many ships. Su Jie watched the dozens of vessels making up the transport convoy ahead, pulled out the 10,000-soul banner from within his clothes, and touched the head of the 1,000-hand centipede wrapped around his arm. "Xiao Qian. Go. Let me see what dropping dumplings into boiling water looks like." Sizzle. The 1,000-hand centipede hissed and crawled down from Su Jie's arm, plunging into the nearby sea. Gurgle. In the water, the 1,000-hand centipede bubbled as it swam, its pale corpse hands detaching on their own, flitting through the water, burrowing into the mud, and finding the pre-placed magnetic water mines. The pale corpse hands, 10 to a group, quickly approached the United States Bay of Bengal Expeditionary Fleet, clutching the magnetic water mines. Water mines are known as the sea battle artifacts of poor nations, with even 10,000-ton warships taking severe damage if hit by just one. But because of their sit-and-wait nature, they can only remain stationary, waiting for ships to collide with them. However, modern sonar technology has become very advanced, making water mines easy to detect and clear away with minesweepers. But Su Jie's use of water mines was different. He wasn't playing the waiting game, but rather, he launched an active assault. Aboard the Wichita coastal combat ship, Emra Abujala, who was working in the sonar room with ear protection, suddenly caught strange acoustic feedback in the hydrophone. Fish schools, dolphins, or something else? Wait, this is the feedback from mines. At first, Emra paid little attention, but upon detecting the sonar signature of the mines, she was so startled she nearly jumped, hurriedly passing the information to the captain. The pale corpse hands, formed of spiritual power, were incredibly strong. 10 arms would clutch a mine, moving their limbs in a fin-like motion, and despite pushing the heavy mines, they moved through the water at a surprisingly rapid pace. Passing information takes time, making critical judgments and issuing orders takes time, but Su Jie didn't plan to give the fleet much time at all. The United States Bay of Bengal Expeditionary Fleet was completely unaware of the imminent danger. The sailors were preoccupied with preparing to port, Many United States Marine Corps soldiers walked onto the deck, chatting and joking about the upcoming battles. Nadia Herbert stretched lazily, looking at the land slowly coming into view, and said to her friend beside her, "Blaze, do you think those rumors about super soldiers are true? Just yesterday, the commander called us for a military seminar specifically to deal with those little supermen. You're scared now. If you're scared, you can shrink back into the cabin." Blaze chuckled, leaning on the railing enjoying the sea breeze. "Bullshit. How could I be scared? Even if someone stuck a gun barrel up my ass, I wouldn't frown. I don't believe the enemy is really impervious to bullets and blades. Maybe it's all exaggerated propaganda. If the generals don't exaggerate the enemy's strength, how can they get more military funding from Congress?" Nadia smirked, not quite believing in super soldiers. She trusted her own rifle more. "Don't worry about it. There are so many tanks over there, and we have aircraft support from the amphibious assault ship behind us. We'll make them cry for their parents." Blaze pointed to the tank landing ships and the military roll-on/roll-off vessels nearby that were carrying tanks, armored vehicles, and military Humvees. "When the time comes, I will." Just as Nadia was about to speak, she suddenly saw the bow of the tank landing ship lift high, a violent explosion throwing up a water column tens of meters high, ripping a massive 10-meter gash in the bow as water poured in frantically. On board, the heavy main battle tanks shook with the explosion. Their securing straps snapped, and they tumbled around in the cargo hold. Several sailors on the ships were crushed to a pulp by the tumbling 30-ton main battle tanks. "What's going on here? What is this?" Nadia shivered, staring wide-eyed at the tank landing ship that was taking on water, helplessly sinking slowly, her mind a blank. "Are you kidding me? Hit by a mine? What on earth are the sonar operators doing?" Blaze took a sharp intake of breath. This was the Chan country's naval port. Could it be that a submarine had secretly come here to lay mines? But that did not make sense. Weren't they just dealing with a warlord? Where could he have gotten a submarine from? As the tank landing ship struck the mine, the sailors of the expeditionary fleet immediately tensed up, realizing that these were indeed heavy water mines. If their own ship were to be hit like that, in the command room of the amphibious assault ship still drifting at sea, David received the news and his face changed color dramatically, issuing commands rapidly. "Order the fleet to halt their advance immediately, retreat from the minefield. Dispatch minesweepers to clear the mines, and deploy anti-submarine helicopters to intensify sonar searches to locate the water mines. The enemy's submarine might still be hiding here. Find it." One must admit David's orders were not wrong. If these were ordinary water mines, at most they would lose a ship. But this time, these water mines were powered by biological kinetic energy. Above the sea, following the explosion of the tank landing ship, the United States transport fleet immediately slowed down. Fortunately, because the fleet was preparing to dock, their speed had already been reduced, which was good, as large ships don't stop immediately like cars do. Not just with a touch of the brakes. Several frigates and destroyers immediately turned on their active sonar, operating at full power. Anti-submarine helicopters took off from the flight deck, releasing sonar buoys, initiating surface search radar, and lowering dipping sonars for comprehensive monitoring of the sea area. What the hell are these things, water mines? Active water mines are not that fast. Inside the cockpit of an anti-submarine helicopter, the pilot nearly popped his eyes out upon seeing the information detected by sonar. The sonar confirmed they were water mines, but why were these mines moving through the water erratically and at such a great speed, as if they were fitted with 180 boosters, and even faster than the Mausy's straight-running, ultra-high-speed torpedoes? The pilot was not unfamiliar with active trigger mines, which can sense changes in magnetism, sound, and pressure in the water, and would automatically activate and head towards a target from a distance away. But those mines were much slower and their active target searching range was very limited, thus posing a minimal threat to warships. Below the surface, a magnetic water mine pushed by pale hands moved toward a high-speed troop transport ship. The transport ship, now slowing down and turning around, was an easy target with no chance of evading. Once the magnetic water mine approached the bottom of the ship, the mine's collision mechanism activated, and these devices contained several hundred kilograms of high explosive, causing a massive blast. Boom! The high-speed transport ship's keel rose upwards sharply as the mine detonated, creating a high-temperature, high-pressure air mass. The air mass expanded and contracted several times underwater, causing repeated violent attacks. From afar, the transport ship looked like a toy broken by a mischievous child. Steel ripped and twisted. The ship's body fractured into two from the middle. The hundreds of United States Marine Corps soldiers on board met a tragic end. Many were killed instantly by the blast's shockwaves, and more soldiers clung to the broken ship, falling into the sea one after another like dumplings. A transport ship was not a combat vessel after all. It was typically thin-skinned and big-bellied, and the water mine's charge was up to 600 or 700 kilograms. In comparison, a 155mm artillery shell's charge is around 10 kilograms, and the famous Harpoon anti-ship missile only carries about 200 kilograms of explosives. One can imagine the destructive power of this mine's explosion. Not to mention that the mine detonated underwater water, being an excellent medium for energy transmission, greatly increased the impact of the explosion. It was visible to the naked eye that this high-speed transport ship, 103 meters in length, 28.5 meters in width, with a full load displacement of 2,400 tons, could not withstand the blast and broke directly into two parts. The bow and the stern rose high, as it sank into the icy depths of the ocean. On the deck, Nadia stood frozen like a petrified fowl. The high-speed transport ship that had just exploded and sunk was not far from him. He saw everything that happened on board. The soldiers that were thrown and torn apart, the broken hull, the propellers sticking out of the water at the stern, and the soldiers dropping into the ocean one after another, crying for help, all deeply impacted his fragile heart. Nadia, come and put on a life jacket. Blaise pulled at the still dazed Nadia. Because of underestimating the enemy and complacency, the originally thought to be safe landing had turned perilous. The U.S. soldiers had made plans to go ashore to entertain themselves in the Chan country and had not bothered to wear the cumbersome life jackets. The entire transport fleet was in disarray. Some soldiers were fighting over life jackets, some were lowering lifeboats, and some new recruits with poor psychological quality were breaking down and falling into chaos, running around like headless flies. Splash! Splash! The two Aegis destroyers and two coastal combat ships escorting the transport fleet also detected the positions of the underwater mines through sonar. Several warships sounded their combat alarms and began launching deep bombs wildly into the sea from their sterns, attempting to detonate the mines in advance. They also deployed acoustic decoys, trying to make the mines mistake their targets and explode prematurely. The deep bombs were indeed effective. Many mines were destroyed, and the pale corpse hands propelling the mines shattered, dissolving into spiritual power that dissipated into the air. But though the United States defenses were tight, there were even more mines. I want to see how much you can defend. From a distant hilltop, Su Jie sat with his legs crossed on a large tree branch, looking at the fleet in utter chaos below, a cold smile on his lips. Compared to the expensive cost of warships, which can reach over $100 million each, mines lack the bright trajectory and sleek appearance. But due to their low cost and simple manufacturing, Su Jie had purchased a large batch. He even acquired the production methods from the Maozi, and the Mande region's military factories had replicated a batch. After all, they weren't too high-tech. They were just simple contact mines. Even if they were traded for the warships, Su Jie would turn a profit if 100 mines took down one transport ship, not to mention the additional casualties of personnel. His eyes narrowed. Su Jie looked toward the direction of the sea, where his waterborne poisonous insects were deployed to serve as eyes for scouting. Su Jie only needed to command the pale corpse hands pushing the mines toward their targets as if he were playing a game. Boom! 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 The sea surface seemed to boil as the mines were detonated one after the other. The destroyers and escort ships fired rockets with deep bombs, creating rows of water columns. Above the sky, anti-submarine helicopters also dropped deep bombs, desperately trying to stop the mines from approaching the transport ships. But even under such intense blockade, some mines managed to get close to the transport ship and then exploded upon contact, overturning people and vessels alike. One by one, high-value military high-speed transport ships were torn apart by mine explosions. The crew located in the lower cabins were crushed against steel walls by the impact, turning into bloody mush. The soldiers who ran to the upper decks also could not escape their fate. Some were crushed by heavy objects on the ship, burnt to death by the fiery cabins, and those who were lucky enough to survive ended up struggling in the sea water. A fierce naval battle thus erupted. On one side were the U.S. Expeditionary Fleet, defending themselves on the sea surface like hedgehogs, and on the other side, seemingly insignificant biological energy mines hidden in the water. They attacked each other relentlessly, and under Su Jie's ruthless onslaught, another 7 or 8 transport ships slowly sank amid the explosions. Those transport ships had really bad luck, encountering someone as ruthless as Su Jie. Using mines holding 700 or 800 kilograms of explosives to blow up transport ships, no transport ship could withstand such a powerful firecracker. Transport ships broke in half on the spot, with their bows and sterns tilting high up. Some transport ships had their entire bows blown away, plunging straight into the sea like a stick, dragging the soldiers who didn't have time to jump into the sea with them, sinking to the seabed to keep the fish company. Some transport ships were directly blown to capsize, like fish with their white bellies up, showing off barnacle dash, limpet dash, and algae-covered bottoms. Many soldiers were pressed under the overturned ships, their pounding and cries echoing in the cabins as they were dragged to the bottom of the sea. Discover stories with Novelbin. Calm. An ammunition transport ship was hit by a water mine and exploded into a small mushroom cloud on the spot, with various debris scattered hundreds of meters. Boom! A fleet oil tanker was hit, spilling a massive amount of fuel oil. Due to the difference in density between the fuel oil and water, the leaked fuel various types of aviation fuel, gasoline, diesel, and heavy oil used for ships floated on the surface of the sea. Blaze and Nadia's transport ship was also hit by a water mine, but the two were lucky enough to jump into the sea and escape. Fortunately, this wasn't the cold Atlantic. They were in the water with life jackets, not drowning anytime soon, and were now searching for debris that could provide buoyancy. But at that moment, the leaked fuel from the oil tanker reached them. Blaze raised his head and saw the various burning debris blasted into the sky by the ammunition ship's explosion falling down, his eyes uncontrollably showing a thick fear. Escape! Fast! Without any hesitation, Blaze paddled with all his might, and they just managed to swim out of the range of the oil spill. The burning debris from the sky ignited the leaked fuel, creating moving patches of fiery oil slicks on the surface of the sea. One by one, soldiers who had jumped into the sea screamed as the fires on the surface engulfed and scorched them. Near the oil tanker, apart from a few soldiers at the edges who managed to escape, the rest were either burned alive or suffocated beneath the water. Su Jie was happily blowing things up on his end, with the supply of water mines in his storage bag steadily depleting. After 20 minutes of action and seeing the dwindling supply of water mines, Su Jie's gaze shifted toward a few destroyers and frigates that were still launching deep bombs. The Aegis destroyer was a bit too far away, and Chan Country's tattered little frigates weren't worth the effort. Finally, Su Jie targeted a coastal combat ship, sending all the remaining water mines hurtling towards it. The 3,000-ton coastal combat ship, running at a high speed of 45 knots, still couldn't escape the pursuit of the water mines. In the end, 3 water mines approached and exploded thunderously, dismembering the coastal combat ship on the spot. The crew members plunged into the sea like dumplings, moving away from the doomed vessel. Having done all this, Su Jie casually put away the 10,000-soul banner, glanced at the disturbed Chan Country Navy dock in the distance, coming to provide support, and then turned away to leave. When the Chan Country Navy arrived late on the scene, they were met with a hair-raising sight. The burning sea, sunken ships, soldiers struggling and calling for help in the water, and the dense floating corpses on the surface, with the waves slowly pushing the bodies towards the beach, forming a small mountain of the dead. As time went on, more and more support arrived, and military bases from the United States sent out rescue forces as soon as possible. But with the distance being too great, by the time they arrived, those who were going to die had already perished, and those who were alive had been rescued. And this sea battle, as the information spread from all parties, set off an uproar on the internet.